Welcome to episode number 93 of Killer POV. I'm one of your hosts, Rob G. from Icons of Fright. To the left, Elric Kane.
What the hell?
Hey, that's the Grindhouse Releasing theme song.
We're not going to talk about it. We're not going to tell you our guest, but I was thinking we could have had alternative music today. That would have been cool, just for this one. But
right.
We'll get to that
Elric
soon.
Kane.
How are you doing?
Rebekah McKendry.
Hello.
Fangoria.
I know it's been 2 weeks, guys.
Been a few weeks.
I missed you
Kind
guys.
of crazy.
Yeah.
It means we have stuff to talk about.
We have a lot to talk about. A lot of films that we saw. Later today we're going to have, hopefully, we think Bob Murawski is going to show up.
Yeah.
And I can honestly say of all, since this started, I think he was my number one guest I wanted.
Yes.
But we ran into a little problem called, what's a podcast?
Yeah.
Where he really genuinely had no idea. And so I think we've now kind of given a little education, a little history on the podcast, and we're hoping he will come.
I'm very excited.
Sam Raimi's editor.
Sam Raimi's editor, co-owner of Grindhouse Releasing, the theme song we just sang.
And so much more. And the editor of the amazing Gone with the Pope, which when you finally get to see it in a couple weeks, maybe, we'll ask him. You guys will be blown away.
Yeah.
If he shows up. If
he shows up. Yeah, there's never a guarantee in this world.
We're assuming he'll be here in a little bit. But yeah, we saw a lot of films this week, so we got a lot to catch up on. But
news first.
Quickly, not even news. I had a question from a fan on our Killer POV page that I mentioned to Bekah as we were walking in that I thought maybe we could tackle really quickly.
Yeah.
You know, it's a pretty good one.
With Sybil Danning. Bring it.
Nothing to do with Sybil Danning. That's coming soon.
He's just obsessed with Sybil.
Who isn't? I mean, after this film? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He's going to talk about it.
We'll talk about that one in a sec.
Okay, so this is on our Facebook page from a gentleman named Simon Kojin. And he was talking about, he's a horror reviewer. And this is essentially what he says. I'm a semi-professional horror reviewer writer, which means I do it in my spare time for a friend's website. I don't get paid. Nobody on the website gets paid. It's a labor of love. Trust me, we understand that.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, and I guess they're in Belgium and the Netherlands, which is interesting. But his question is this. How do you keep from thinking too much about the reviews you have to write and the whole process of watching movies becoming a chore? I seem to be ruining my movie watching experience by already thinking about what I'm going to write instead of actually watching with an open mind and enjoying it. I've already seen so many movies in my life that have lost some of the youthful innocence. But add to that knowledge that I have to write something meaningful about it. I love movies. I don't want to lose that love. I'm not a journalist like you guys, but I just wanted to know if you sometimes feel the same and how you deal with it, which is interesting. It's like we watch a lot of films. So in the sense of either writing about them or reviewing them, do we ever lose our love of that?
Well, I'll start because I'm different than you guys because I'll happily make top 5 lists and stuff. I've actually purposely from about 10 years ago decided, even in New Zealand when I was thinking about writing stuff like reviews and that, I decided at a certain point I didn't want to write reviews of movies.
It's true. I've asked him for Fango and he always turns me down.
I just genuinely have always wanted to make films, and I don't feel like they're totally in conflict, and people do it all the time. A lot of reviewers become directors, but for some reason I never felt like, probably because kind of like the show, I don't feel necessarily good about the negative
aspect
side of I'm going to slam this movie and then I have to be on a bus with some guy. But it's not, I'm sure I would do it, but I feel like that's been one way. But I do get burnout occasionally doing the show. I think last year you reach a certain point if you do this, let's say we did 3 months in a row and you just need to have a break. And we had a little break at one point. But I think the number one thing for me, and that's why I'll get mine out of the way because you guys are different, is to watch different stuff. Yeah. And I feel for me, I have such a broad cinematic interest that if I start getting bored of horror, I feel like horror is dying for some reason, I can just go watch some crazy foreign film and then come back to it when things look better, But yeah, I think it is an interesting question. I think if you're always having to write, it's amazing to see, say, Roger Ebert. If you haven't seen Life Itself, I'd highly recommend that film. I thought it was actually one of the best films of the year last year. I'm shocked it didn't get an Oscar nomination, but I think the fact that his passion didn't seem to ever really waver for what he did. He found a way to have a fresh approach. But I'll open it to you guys for that.
Bekah?
Yeah, I watch, seriously, it's at least one film a day, either for review or for research for stuff that we're writing, or so-and-so's writing about it, so I need to know about it, or, they're working with the company, things like that. And there's certain types of films that if I watch a whole bunch in a row, I'll have to have kind of a palate cleanser. And reviewing, for some reason, that one never really bothered me. I mean, when I review, I watch seriously with a notebook in hand. You guys have both seen me do it, where I'll sit there and jot down notes as I go just so I can recall.
Which is common,
things.
I think. I think a lot of film reviewers always.
Yeah, actually,
also,
in the
reviews,
screenings, that's pretty common.
Reviews aren't your main thing, though.
No.
That's another important thing. Like, if that's the specific thing that you do for whatever website it is, or, then it's like, well, that's your sole job, and it might start to get a little tedious. But you were in the position where you get to mix it up.
Yeah, I do get to mix it up. So like each week, one might be for review, another one might be for like a marketing thing because we're doing some promotion with Sony. Another one might be for we're doing a top 10 blank films and I haven't seen this one and people are recommending it. So yeah, it gets mixed up a lot.
I'm all about anything that's spreading cinema.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll always do that. That's fun to me.
But I definitely do get burnt out on the genre occasionally. But then again, I mean, I always have things that are kind of my go-to. So like I get sick of horror, I'll go watch like 4 hours of Archer in a row. Right. So I kind of have like my other outlets, like because I love animation so much, that seems to be a lot of them. And then there are nights that I just don't know what, like last night I got home from a screening I didn't particularly like, and I found myself watching this horrible reality dance team show on Lifetime, but I was like mesmerized by it, and it was just like, it was just feeding my brain for a bit.
She watches a lot of porn.
So much porn.
All just a roundabout way.
It's really all there is.
I'll watch hours of the Food Network and just Chopped, and just I'm so engulfed in that.
Wow. See, my mom watches the Food Network
it's
like
so
constant, and I'm like, what's up with that?
I wish I had that ability to cook, and I watch these shows and I get like so hungry and jealous at the same time.
Wow, see, I can't do that. Like, she will seriously watch shows where people are like making meatloafs, and she'll be like, "Did you see what they did with the ketchup?" And I'm like,
I think that's so exciting.
Shit.
No, I'm like, oh my God, that looks so good. I wish I knew how to do that.
Like, it's food porn.
Yeah.
You're watching food porn.
I could never watch golf, but I wish I could.
No, golf seems boring.
I like that. Like, what's our go-to channel if we're not, like, honestly, Animal Planet. I can't watch the animal hoarding show, but any type of show that's about, like, the mating rituals of the East Coast gopher, I can totally, because it's, I can watch that anytime.
I watch basketball.
Well, for me regarding that, when I started Icons of Fright back in 2004, the goal of reviews was essentially a lot what Elric said is like, I was more interested in shining the spotlight on these little indie horror films that not a lot of people heard about. So it's more like, when you see something, you get so excited that you just want to tell people about it. Mm-hmm. So that was, and again, because if you own your own site, you could do whatever the hell you want. So I didn't have to review anything. It was more what I wanted to review. So in the early days, that was my position, was like, well, I don't really feel the need to talk negatively about something, because for why would I waste an hour on negative energy when I could waste that hour recommending 10 films I love and spread the positive. And that's, that's a big part of the show too, is like, we don't harp on, we all have different opinions and tastes, but we don't harp on negative or talking bad about something because it's pointless.
Yeah.
We might do an overrated episode at some point.
Yeah.
I think we need to do a drunken overrated.
And see, I'm the one that keeps arguing that one because I think it'd be too negative.
And maybe there's a way to do it where it's just talking about overrated doesn't mean bad.
No, it doesn't.
If one of the other people was able to defend the overrated movie, then I think maybe that would make it fair.
But this is why I said, see, I'm going to need to be drunk to do it, because I can say, in one sense, I find Exorcist to be incredibly overrated. But you want me to get like in depth on it, I'm going to have to drink some courage for that.
But no, then later on, I mean, you get to a position where you build up a relationship with some of these companies that send you Blu-rays and DVDs or whatever. And then you feel the obligation, like, all right, well, they're sending it to me, so I should watch it whether I like it or not. But, now, thankfully, I'm in a position where I don't have to review anything I don't want to. I don't have to sit through anything I don't want to. I just like to watch films that I hear about, that I think are going to be positive and good. And my advice to Simon, I mean, again, there's no wrong or right way to do it. Bekah said she likes to take notes during the movie. I do not. I try to like, I also hate when people try to guess the ending and stuff like that. I try to be a blank slate. I just want the movie to work. I want it to work as an experience for me. And then what I do is, in terms of a bit of writing advice that I give to a lot of the guys at Icons and girls at Icons that write there, is that, when you finish a movie, pretend like you're writing an email to one of your best friends about it. Like that's the way to get your passion. Because if I'm gonna write you about something I just saw, I'm gonna tell you, oh man, I just saw this movie. I just saw 3 O'Clock High. The cinematography is gorgeous. I thought it was really funny, and then this happens and this happens. I think that's a good, because writing can be an intimidating thing, but I feel like if you break it down in context of something you do every day, it's a lot easier. You could be more confident with it. So if you start to get a little tired of genre movies or whatever it is go to a different type of entertainment that, whether it's reading or playing video games or watching a TV show, you could always space out your time and still enjoy and have that love of movies. So
diversity is the key.
Yeah. So there you go, Simon. I hope that helps.
And when I started doing reviews, I was coming from this theater background, and in theater, the thing is, whenever you're doing criticism, it may not even be just in theater, but I'd always heard the rule with criticism is 3 positives and a negative. And so when I started doing reviews, that's how, if you go back and look at like 10 years ago, like how all of my reviews are sculpted, it's all 3 paragraphs with 3 positives and then one negative. And so that's how I did everything. But the one thing that it pointed out to me was that even if the movie is pretty poorly made, I can find 3 good things about it, about almost every movie.
I can't.
Really?
No, there's been even movies that we've had a couple guests on here where I look back and go, no, you know what? Good idea, but man, that movie's just bad from asshole to breakfast time. As Harold Pinter would say.
There's definitely been
some
Pinter quotes.
That's right.
You didn't pause.
I know I should have paused.
Yeah, so
let's get into, we saw so many movies. And,
let's do movies.
We have to get it done before Bob Murawski doesn't come.
I know.
This is going to break my heart. He has to.
Okay, I saw 3 things I wanted to talk about right off the bat. Number 1, Horns. Horns is finally on Netflix.
Finally, you watched it.
Finally saw it. I loved it.
Okay. All right. You and Mike Williamson.
I loved it too.
Loved it. And here's the thing. I like Alex Aja, but I don't love any of his movies. I always think he's one step shy of making a great movie. And that's, it could be a cultural thing in terms of, because he's a French guy and maybe he doesn't understand American kind of sensibilities. Right. Like his humor throws me off. I don't think he thinks Piranha's funny, but it is.
Oh yeah, Piranha's funny.
That sort of thing. And also, Joe Hill, the author of the book Horns, who is Stephen King's son. And I just, I didn't know anything about this story at all. So I just watched it blindly on Netflix and I just loved it. I mean, it's got that traditional, kind of trademark old school Stephen King vibe to it. The idea of a character that suddenly grows horns, and because he's trying to figure out what happened with his girlfriend.
Stuff I loved.
He's accused of killing his girlfriend, and you're not sure if he did it or not. He's not sure. So it's kind of got that mystery angle to it. But I really love the world that's built in. It felt like a very not to compare Joe to his father.
Said world. You meant worlds it creates.
Worlds. All right,
the tones.
Yeah.
There's some pretty big tonal shifts in the
Well,
world.
you know what? That's the thing. There are a lot of tonal shifts because there is like absurdist comedy that comes out of nowhere,
which I liked.
But I like it all. Even though there's multiple tones, I still enjoy the whole thing.
I totally love the black humor, and I love the setup. Where I didn't think it was effective was when the kind of the later half, where it's like the mystery stuff of who did it kind of movie. Because I felt like we're too far ahead of the audience. Like I felt always like, okay, I got it.
Yeah,
I guess I guess in that sense, I could say it's old fashioned in its storytelling because you're right. I kind of called a few.
It's not Rob Reiner. Like Rob Reiner or somebody would have maybe a little more panache to hold that back.
And there was one scene that just didn't fit in for me. Was the scene at the logging mill when they were kids? It was a flashback to when they were kids.
Oh, right.
And something I can't even remember the gist of it now, but they'd been like daring somebody to jump down the log flume, and he ended up hitting his head on a log, and then somebody else saved him. I remember during the movie feeling like that scene didn't mesh in, and it was weird for me because whereas the rest of the movie had this fantasy kind of fairy tale vibe, that had nothing.
Yeah, but there's a specific reason that's in there.
Yeah, it was to show how they're brothers. But I just remember
No, there's plot points.
Okay. I may be forgetting this. I saw it like a year ago.
Yeah. But I mean, it's an interesting movie for sure, and I can tell that I probably love the book. That was the feeling I got from it. I really liked the material.
Also, I really like Daniel Radcliffe. I thought he's. I don't know Harry Potter at all, but he's great. And all I kept thinking.
Have you not seen Harry Potter, Rob?
Whole other story.
My God.
Not on a horror podcast.
We're going to talk about this at some point.
But even though Paul Solet is a writer director and not an actor, I would love it if he'd play Daniel Radcliffe's brother, because I'm staring at him and they kind of got a similar look in the eyes and everything. So I was like,
Graham Skipper even more.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. Yeah,
As the ultimate.
Graham Skipper.
Because I saw a poster of Graham Skipper. No, of a movie for Daniel Radcliffe. And it's like a romantic comedy or something. I walked by it going, "Oh, Graham's in a movie," and I really thought Graham was in a movie, and I thought that was pretty funny. But okay. Well, I'm glad. Yeah, Horns is definitely one. I'm surprised it's not more popular. For me, it was just too much of a tonal mess. Even though I thought it was a good movie.
I liked it a lot more, and I had the lower expectation than I anticipated. And honestly, it's my favorite of Alex Aja's movies. Okay. I think it's the best thing he's done. So that's that one.
I like that one he made with a bad ending.
Yeah, me too.
I do love
that one. Is pretty solid
as well.
Great film. I guess I'll shoot the rest of these out really quick. Blacula and Scream. Blacula Scream.
Oh, the Scream Factory edition.
Watch them both. That comes out March 3rd on Blu-ray from Scream Factory. And here's the deal. I have never seen these films, okay? And not that I want to... downplay my opinions of them. It's you hear the name Blacula and it's obviously a blaxploitation movie. You think, oh, it's probably going to be whatever. But I loved these movies, and I thought like Blacula was generally a great scary movie. I was like, this is a really really. It was much better and more serious than my, I guess, thought of what the title
my memory
suggested.
Would be that they were goofy, but I would have only seen maybe the sequel. Like
No, because even the sequel's like serious.
It's pretty good. Yeah, sequel's not as good as the first one, but the first one's like a solid movie. And in fact, there's two scenes in particular that were really like effectively scary. And I was like, and you know what else? It predates Salem's Lot, and the vampires in it kind of have that really creepy Salem's Lot vibe that Tobe Hooper did years later. So I was just like really blown away by how I was expecting kind of a campy sort of thing, and it wasn't. It played it serious. There's funny elements just because of the time period. This is 72 and then 73 back to back. So because of the time period, it's a little a little goofy in that sense. But and
that one that just doesn't have Seven Brides of Blacula.
No. But William Marshall plays him is great, and obviously in the second movie, Pam Grier's in that one. But I thought these movies were really solid.
That's cool to know. Yeah,
they look fantastic. I think you'd really appreciate it if you watch it now as an adult. And again, I knew nothing about it. Great music too. The soundtracks.
Is there a female version of that, like from that same period?
Well, there's one
female blaxploitation vampire film.
Not vampire. There's one called Sugar Hill that I absolutely love.
That might be the one I saw when I was young.
Yeah, that's one of my fave movies.
It would be interesting to do black horror, because it's such a obviously it's a minor category, but then there's movies like Ganja and Hess, which are really interesting. And Ganja and Hess has just been remade in a way by Spike Lee. His new film is called, I think, Sweet Blood of Jesus, and it's basically a remake of this really. Ganja and Hess is the lead actor, and I think he directed it too. I can't remember.
Night of the Living Dead?
Night of the Living Dead.
Oh,
yeah.
right.
I saw it for a show we were doing with Elijah.
Yeah, Elijah did the special features on that.
But I remember going, you kind of like, I don't know what it is about some of that period where you're kind of like, I don't know if I want to see it. And then you watch and go, oh, this is actually like a serious film.
It's a good film.
Maybe it's because blaxploitation in general had that kind of
you expect. Look, you see stuff like Rocky, Foxy Brown and Coffee. Those are good. Those are good movies.
Coffee's intense.
There's some good stuff in it. But I was pleasantly surprised by how much I enyed these, and I definitely recommend them. Last but not least, I've never seen this either. Out now, also from Scream Factory, New Year's Evil, which was quite something.
I was kind of bored.
But
I'm not a slasher person.
I never saw it before, and while I was watching it, I just thought it was so out there. And I mean, the Blu-ray looks great, and there's all this weird music in it. I love anything that has a theme song that's actually in the movie, like the title of the movie, and it's pretty colorful and ambitious. But I love that it's got that Golden Globus and it's got their aesthetic to it. And it's funny, I read an article that Brian Collins wrote directly after watching the movie, essentially saying, he's like, man, it's a shame that Golden Globus didn't make more slasher movies, because this was 1980 before the Friday 13th craze. It is pretty radical. It's like this guy that's killing people all over Los Angeles at midnight, but for different time zones. So it's like he's got like 6 kills lined up from 9 p.m. to midnight.
Oh, that's funny.
And the grand one at midnight is going to be this girl that's hosting like this live radio show, whatever. So in terms of that doesn't make it good.
Yeah,
but
it's one of those ones that comes on TV a lot.
It's the wacky ambition behind it is kind of it's kind of fun and crazy. And it's they did stuff like that. And Golden Globus made 10 to midnight, the Bronson and slasher movie, which is
I like
amazing.
that film's great.
But yeah, it was a lot crazier than I thought. I recommend at least seeing it once. It's definitely fun.
Nice.
So
Very cool.
that's all mine.
Why don't I start with the one that we were talking about, because you are also going to talk about this.
Yes.
They're Playing with Fire,
Which I lent to you. What's that?
Did you review it here yet?
I may have talked. I've mentioned it before.
Okay, so yeah, you put it out there because, well, I look at the cover of this and it looks like,
it looks like an 80s rom-com.
Yeah, it looks like a comedy, like sex comedy for sure. It's Sybil Danning lifting up her leg at some guy in high school or whatever. That's how it looks anyway.
It's got kind of a graduate cover.
Yeah.
This is a really bad shit movie, and I'm really glad I saw it. I am a big Sybil fan, especially this prime Sybil.
Which is why
especially my favorite Sybil is Naked Sybil.
Yeah,
Yes.
I will say there's been a group text amongst all of us that I've been stuck in where they definitely spent a good half a day discussing Sybil Danning and not her fabulous
nothing wrong with
mind.
that.
No, I mean, I like
Nothing
all
wrong
of
with
it,
her
but,
two assets.
She,
Perfect assets.
anyway, this is a weird film, Rob.
when I handed it, by the way, when I handed it to you, you're like, I can't talk about this on the show. And I was like, trust me. You can.
Okay. Well, we will just cut to the chase there. This film does, in the last act, become basically a little bit before the last act, but fully in the last act, a slasher film. It's a full slasher formula.
Out of nowhere, almost.
You almost feel like perhaps that was a note after shooting began. Like slashers are big. You gotta make this a slasher somehow. But Sybil's in great form. She's actually a really decent actress. I think that's something that gets lost a lot. And things like Howling 2.
She is a teacher seducing one of her students. So obviously we all relate to this one. And she's trying to convince her student to get involved in some sort of
murder for the money for the family to
there
get the
you
money,
go.
that kind of thing. Very typical setup. But I had a lot of fun watching. I think people really enjoy it. But no, between this and is it Chained Heat or Caged Heat? I think it's Chained Heat.
Caged
the one with Linda
prison.
Blair and her in prison is like one of my favorite prison films, and she's really good at it. She's just she's a good actress, like in the right kind of thing. But I really like this. This I think would be for people who felt like they've seen all those good fun 80s films. This is definitely one they could dust off and have a good time to. It's pretty bad shit.
Yeah.
And the nudity is pretty fantastic.
Yeah. I want to do a little screening of this at some point for sure.
If we can get Sybil, I'm down. And then I do peer pressure from Dennis Atherton.
Oh, Caged Heat, by the way. Caged Heat is Barbara Steele.
Okay, yeah.
But
so it must be Chained.
Don't think it's Sybil Danning.
It's probably Chained, and there's also Reform School Girls.
She's great in Reform School.
But Chained Heat's like one of my favorite movies ever. It's just like one of those crazy. You need a shower after that film. Okay, so quickly, I hadn't seen Xtro before, and now I know why.
Which is insane.
Well, no, it's not. Well, everyone hasn't seen a movie, but I realized why I haven't seen this movie. There's two of them. There's some sci-fi movie called not MacGyver, but it's a word like that, Guyver or something.
Oh, the Guyver, that's right.
That movie and Enemy Mine are two films that I've seen the covers a lot. I've seen Enemy Mine, I haven't seen Guyver, but the cover of Guyver is very similar to what I saw, especially this cover that's in front of me of Xtro. So I just kind of lumped it all together all these years, especially Enemy Mine. I was like, it's going to be like an alien sci-fi kind of thing. This is not a science fiction movie. This happens as something comes from outer space, but this is just like pure monster on Earth movie. This movie is so freaking awesome.
Awesome?
Dude, this is like
I'm so glad you said that.
Necronomicon of the year for sure. This movie had so much fun watching.
Dennis is going to be so happy.
Crazy practical effects. He's totally right. Look, I was trying to explain to...
Whose copy is this?
Mine.
I'm borrowing it.
Okay.
I'm taking it. You're taking my They're Playing with Fire?
Okay,
it's the kind of movie I can only assume it is known unless, I guess, because it's really not that easy to find, especially on this side of the pond. But the practical effects are amazing. Now, the director on that starts talking about the film, and it's really terrible interview because he's just like, it's just a bunch of crap and bullshit, and we just threw ideas and none of us cared at all. We just wanted to make... And it kind of devalues what they're doing, but it has that kind of subconscious... great filmmaking going on, whereas what you're watching is bonkers. It's not bonkers like The Visitor, where the story's all over the place. It's bonkers just in terms of like, what the hell am I watching? And the effects are crazy good and like amazing. It has literally the best birth scene probably ever in a movie.
I think I texted you that. Okay.
And then it came and I was like, that's big shoes to fill. Because I've seen a lot of crazy birth scenes. I was like, oh no, that's probably the best. It's kind
of the best.
No, it's really, you know what, this is a movie. This is all the things that now I don't want to overhype it to Rob because I have done that before. But it's in the same category of how I loved those other movies. Like, was that the one?
The Visitor.
No, what's that one I loved recently? The Kindred.
Kindred.
This I think is probably a better film than the Kindred. Kindred to me is more like that as a group film would just play great. I actually think this is a little more serious and also opens on a house that I swear looks just like the Don't Look Now house because it's shot in England. But it's a really great movie, and thank you to Dennis for forcing my hand on that one.
Yeah, because I've been telling him for years that this is such a good one.
I think it's really just the cover. I think sometimes that's all it takes is like, this cover looks just like the
That's
Terminator.
not the only cover.
No,
There's another cover that's got the actual like monster goblin looking thing.
The poster one, which has the little boy and a goblin. I mean, the very start, just to anyone who doesn't know what the story is without ruining anything, is literally it's just a boy and his dad on their front step, and suddenly the dad gets beamed up, and then it's like a couple years later, and the dad, he's kind of coming back, and the son's having these weird premonitions about his dad, and it's crazy. I mean, from that moment on, it's like, whoa, the monster stuff's insane. And then I have to share this because this was very exciting for me. Definitely, it's kind of breaking into top 10 material for me. I finally didn't crack the code red thing for Messiah of Evil. I've been trying and trying. I kept missing out. Finally, a guy called Shane Bitterling, who comes to Jump Cut Trivia, lent me his copy. I watched it, and then yesterday I finally cracked the code and bought a copy as well. It's very hard to get code red Blu-rays, but this film is like, it was like seeing, I'd always really liked that movie, but you know, it's pretty obscure, and it's usually pretty dirty and grainy and dark, and this is just like, it's like an Argento American film. It is gorgeous. Everything's just blue and red filters, and it's all stream of consciousness. I liken it a lot to Carnival of Souls, but like in color, with a weird diaristic approach where you keep hearing voiceover all the way through it, like she's telling her story, which is the one weird part of it. It's made by the people who made Howard the Duck.
Yes.
And they also wrote...
They wrote all the Indiana Jones movies.
No, George Lucas's, what is it called? His first good movie after THX?
American Graffiti.
They wrote American Graffiti.
Okay. I thought they did something on the Indiana Jones
They
movies.
might have. They probably were like a team that he went to on everything.
Yeah.
But I don't think they got credited as that. Anyway, this is just a fascinating movie. If you haven't seen it, wait to see this particular copy, because I think it's going to be really something worth seeing. You know, I think it's you don't want to just watch a VHS. If you're hearing this for the first time, I would really plug for you to see this as good as possible.
Messiah of Evil. It's very surrealistic.
Yeah, it's slow and arty, but it's got a couple scenes, one in particular, and I'll say it's the movie theater scene, but beyond just being like a cool looking scene because it's in a movie theater, it's exact replica of the bird scene where Tippy starts noticing birds landing and she doesn't think much of it, and then they're behind her, and then the way they play out that scene is exactly how they do a movie theater kind of zombie scene, and it's just so, it's like one of my favorite movie scenes now. This is a great movie, and I think it's going to keep popping up on Code Red, but they just don't stay on for long. So have a look. And just to quick, and also I'll just quickly tell you what I did at. I did the Hollywood Underground Film Festival, where even our guest came, but not my two co-hosts. Even the guest came. If the guest comes, I'll let you both off the hook if the guest doesn't come. Anyway, there's a couple of horror films in there. It was all over the place, though. Obviously, in terms of content, it was amazing. We got Kenneth Anger, the avant-garde artist, to show up. Saying I didn't want to. My whole thing was I didn't want to advertise that because I didn't know if he'd come because he's 88, but B, I wanted to be proud of selling every ticket without any hook.
Yeah.
That was like a test for me to see if this is even worth doing again. And we did. We sold out both shows. I think we sold out Betamax. And then we, Crowhand and Red Luck would be the two horror ones I'd highlight. If you're looking at Crowhand's just super fun. It's going to play every festival. Red Luck actually won Slam Dance and plays, funnily enough, plays Cannibal Holocaust music in it. And the lights come up and Bob Murawski, who's our guest today, has the rights to Cannibal Holocaust. They kind of looked over and he goes, well, that's interesting. Music.
Get on that.
That was kind of interesting. It's kind of a Jeffrey Dahmer. It's kind of like a weird romantic, like bizarre movie, and yet it's kind of about Dahmer and stuff, and kind of magical. But Betamax is really interesting. Betamax is still, it's still a little messy. They were shooting up until like an hour before for real. Like it was crazy. It was the most punk thing I've ever seen. And the wraparound wasn't finished. And Jim Coons, who made all our discs, still has some, of his effect shots to render and stuff. So it was really brave of them to even go for it. Yeah. And it's a perfect crowd for it. I had a blast because unlike a lot of other anthologies, this had some really silly tones and was fun and kind of, because these are more like artist types for the most part. Jim's a filmmaker, and his felt the most like a short movie. Damon's Packard is just absolute bonkers, like a straight comedy about
John Carpenter
dying. It's hilarious.
It's insane, and some people hated it, I could tell, and others just like, we're dying. I was dying. But there's one film in the middle that I'd really highlight. A guy called Scooter McCrae. He made a film that the air went out of the room, man. It's the only one that's dark.
Well, and why does his name sound familiar?
Because he writes for Fango.
Yeah,
that's it.
Stuff,
okay.
I had never heard of him, and a lot of these people I hadn't heard of. And this film, it has a person in it whose face doesn't look right, to be perfectly, and it has weird, like, kind of staples down the back of the head, and it's kind of a Frankenstein monster visiting a prostitute. It's a woman Frankenstein monster visiting the female prostitute, and it has a big twist, and I won't go into it, but man, you're watching this movie, and you're just mesmerized by the performance, and just something about the tone. It's not just the performance, but everyone afterwards, kind of like Under the Skin, where everyone's like, is that person a real person? This person apparently was found on like a Reclaim Your Body website or something, talking about, you know, how they're proud of how they look, but the way it was used in this film was, you know, like things that CGI just can't do, you know, and the emotion of it too. It was just but it was just fascinating because it couldn't have been in Stranger Company. Like, it was like comedy, really goofy comedy. One's almost like stand up, almost like a YouTube skit. And then suddenly this film, like, which is a really solid in the middle. So I think that's going to be an interesting project when it hits. It's not for everyone, but I had a lot of fun. Anyway, and then the festival, you know, went nicely, and we're happy with it. And, you know, it was fun. It was fun just, again, sharing films. You know, it was a good time. Bekah.
What'd you see?
So this week, let's see here. Well, I had trivia night, which was a blast.
Oh, yeah.
And so that was the big thing. And then we had, I rewatched Housebound, which is streaming on Netflix now, which I wasn't expecting to be heading to instant streaming so quickly, but that's awesome that it is. So I got to rewatch that one. One of the cool things that I watched this week was Cutthroats 9 from 1972. It's a Western, but it definitely still falls into the horror category because it's so freaking gory.
So you had the new Bev?
No, and actually I didn't realize until after I'd watched it.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize I watched it 2 weeks ago. And then I was talking with somebody about it at Jump Cut like the next day, and they were like, you know, it's playing at New Bev in like 2 weeks. And I was like, frick, I could have seen it in 35 millimeter. But yeah, it's great because I have like a really old DVD copy of it. But if you get a chance, I think mine's on like a double disc with another Western. But yeah, it's definitely a very gory, intense Western.
We saw the trailer at the Duke Mitchell film.
Okay, that makes sense.
And it had lots and lots and lots of killing and throats being cut.
That's kind of it. It's literally a warden and his wife and his daughter and a group of prisoners are kind of heading through a mountain pass, and some shit happens, and then it kind of ends up like a siege film, I'll call it, where like they're stuck there and there are all these horrible prisoners trying to get at his daughter, and he has to fend, and he's trying to figure out which one killed his wife. And yeah, so it's definitely kind of a revenge film. But I
haven't seen it before. I hadn't even heard of it until I saw that trailer, to be honest. Okay.
Is he here? He's here. He's
but
here.
We're going to keep talking.
Okay,
I'm very excited.
then I'm going to move quickly through. So I also saw The Maze Runner, which is not exactly horror, but it does have really cool spider monsters in a maze, which was fun. I had a lot of fun with it. But then it reminded me that there's actually a movie called Spider Labyrinth. So then I had to go back and watch this. It's from 1988. It's Italian. I need you guys to see this film.
Okay.
Spider Labyrinth?
Spider Labyrinth from 1988, and it's Italian. But the version I saw has like Japanese subtitles, but I own it.
Is there anything to do with each other?
No, not at all. No, I think Maze Runner is like a really good film, and Spider Labyrinth is like a crazy art film.
Yeah, Maze Runner. I like the lead actor in Maze Runner. I remember he'd been talked about for Spider-Man quite a lot. He was the Styles in the Teen Wolf show, and I've liked him in everything I've seen him in because he has just a natural humor to him. But this didn't look humorous, obviously.
It isn't humorous, but I actually really liked it. And it's my mom's visiting right now, and so I was trying to find like a happy mom film because I don't exactly like. She likes sci-fi, and I didn't exactly like want to throw Xtro on and be like, "Look, mom, birthing scene." So instead I'm like going through Amazon, and I was like, Maze Runner looks very wholesome.
Right.
So we watched that one, and she actually didn't like it at all. She was like, "I just don't get these kids in this glen and why they would even put them here." And they explain it at the end, and she's like, "That's just a shit reason." But yeah, my mom's a little bit more realist. She wants real sci-fi.
Your portrayal is perfectly hick and
I'm sorry.
which is not your mom.
My mom has a southern accent though, so it's hard for me to do an impersonation of her without it coming out. I watched Vampire's Kiss again, which was released by Scream Factory. And what's weird for me about Vampire's Kiss is when I was a kid watching this film, I thought it was a comedy. Like, I thought this movie was hilarious, and now watching it as an adult, it is so dark and twisted. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So yeah, I had to go back and rewatch it.
We're talking about Nick Cage one, right?
Yeah. I watched Annabelle finally.
Oh, I've been. That's on my queue still too.
I think you watched that one. No.
Did I watch? No, it was.
Wait, I thought.
Did I watch that one last 2 weeks?
You were the only one that
watched
saw
it. I hadn't seen it yet.
I feel like you saw it, or either that, or we had this conversation off air.
I watched Ouija. We may have had this conversation off air, though.
No, I'm sorry, they're not all the same.
No,
but
I
go
watched
ahead.
Ouija and Annabelle, and
I haven't seen
Ouija
Ouija.
was like, I hate to say it because I love
We know.
Morgan Peter Brown. Somebody gets to take a shot now because I said his name. But it was kind of unwatchable.
I don't think Morgan wrote or directed that film, so I think
That's good because it was unwatchable.
Okay.
Annabelle had some good sequences in it, like the sequence in the basement with the elevator.
Yeah, that was the part
actually
I
a
liked,
really
yeah.
cool segment. I liked that one a lot.
Yeah,
But it doesn't work as a whole.
Yeah.
It's character stuff that was boring.
It was just
the first 30 minutes.
It was that's it. We were texting back and forth because I kept saying
that
this
might have been,
movie
yeah.
is so vanilla, and you were like,
Yeah.
it's like bland, it's like tasteless. Yeah, we were texting. I know.
It's a shame.
Sometimes when we talk, we think we're on air.
It's all good.
But then, leading up to this one, so I'm on this podcast. Last night, I was a guest on Andrew Furtado. Andrew Furtado's podcast,
Now
which
streaming.
is all about now streaming on Netflix. It's all about things that are streaming on Netflix. So I spent a couple of days watching things that were instant streaming on Netflix, which is why I found Housebound again. And I stumbled across this documentary called Galapagos: Satan Comes to Eden. And it is a documentary, so don't watch it preparing, expecting like a cool horror film or anything. But the concept of it is so cool. I want someone to make this into a horror film. It is about a family, a British family from long ago. It was like 40s, or actually I'd say a little bit more recent, that picks up, decides they're sick of society, picks up, moves the entire family, like extended relatives, everything, to the Galapagos Islands.
Sounds like Mosquito Coast.
And then somehow they all end up going insane and killing each other. And it's true. And so this documentary is about it. And I want this as a movie.
You
It
probably
needs
shouldn't
to
have told
be.
everyone because you could have made that movie now. Some other guy.
Now, so, yeah.
There's
One of our
producers
listeners
listening to the show.
Somebody do it.
Craig Perry just made that.
Call me up. Give me like an
phone calls are
associate
made.
producer. Craig, get on that. I'll have a script for you by Monday,
And
man.
thanks for the babysit, Craig.
Yeah.
I
so,
did question that. I will say I got a very nice baby seat or kid seat, from Craig Perry. And I remember it did cross my mind, like, do you accept a baby seat for a guy who created the Final Destination franchise? Like, you think about Final, that just doesn't safety,
Safe or
Maybe it's
not.
extra
he also
safe.
made American Pie. So
yeah,
sure,
it's,
okay.
it's also funny and
In other words, I'll
wholesome.
clean it. Very good.
So anyways, that was my viewing for this week. Oh, and last thing, I bought a Zariah board.
Oh, yeah.
Because we talked about
yeah.
him on the show with Adam
I think you
Robital.
posted the photo on this?
I did
Yeah,
post the photo. But the reason that I bought it is actually pretty fun because I'm planning to I'm shooting another film in 2 weeks. And I needed a Ouija board to use in the film. And the Ouija board is kind of crucial in it. So you actually have to do close-ups on the Ouija board. And I have been searching on eBay for over a month now trying to find a Ouija board that I can use a close-up of that does not say fucking Parker Brothers at the bottom. Because I'm like, that's probably a trademark issue when we start running festivals. And any Ouija that does not say Parker Brothers on it is like 100 years old and soaked in lamb's blood and a witch died on it and all this batshit crazy
That's
stuff.
good. Get
So
that
then I
one.
was like, what the hell, that Zariah board, I'm going to look it up. And I found one and I bought it.
It looks complicated.
It does look really complicated.
And tell them that everyone in Bekah's family died.
As soon as the board arrived,
she's
she
taking it
used
well.
it.
I've got it on this card table out in my office right now. And so whenever anybody comes in, I'm like, can I take the Zariah board a spin? And no one has yet. So I haven't gotten to try it out yet.
I'm too scared
It's
to play
huge,
it, but I
though.
will look at it.
It's
Yeah, I
like
know
the
better.
size of a card table. It's a huge board.
Okay.
So
I'll look at it. I do want to see it up close, but
it's got what's weird is it came in the same kind of box as like a Parker Brothers box where it's like the ultimate party board, but it's from the 60s. So the people who are playing with the Zariah board, it's like two hippies and a guy with a bow tie on.
wow.
So
Wow.
the box
That's
itself is
something.
hilarious.
I'm gonna give you a little music cue, and then I think we should bring in an Oscar winner.
Sure.
No one under 18 admitted.
Okay, so introducing our guest, the one person at this table who did come to my film festival this weekend.
Holy
And it was
freaking
great.
shit,
Thank you,
Elric.
Bob.
Oh my God.
All 18 hours of it.
Every time I looked up, I knew if things were dragging. It was like that scene of Whiplash. Am I dragging or is it your tempo? And I could see Bob Fixing. Oh, my tempo, man. Come on. Let's
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of good movies,
There's
but
some
definitely they all
interesting
needed a little.
Yeah, a little trimming. But this is Bob Murawski, and since we started the show, you were somebody we had Bill Lustig on here at one point, and that was one of our favorite episodes because he's done so many different things. And
Yeah,
I feel
Bill's
like
great.
yeah, you fit into that same mold. And we had just been raving the last couple weeks about Gone with the Pope and Massacre
Oh my
Mafia
gosh,
style.
yeah.
And so it's been a lot of fun. So it's perfect timing, and we are all going to the Beyond.
Yes.
At midnight.
Friday night.
This airs.
And this show airs Friday morning. So if you're in LA listening to this right now,
Tonight.
just know.
Come
tonight,
see us.
The Beyond, one of the movies I'd most want to see on the big screen.
In
my whole
35
life.
millimeter.
35 millimeter.
Yes.
At the New
Beautiful
York.
print.
Are you going to be there?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Anyway, so
Wait, it's at the new. I thought
at
it was
the
the Newark.
Oh, I thought it was
in
Landmark.
Santa Monica,
Okay.
no.
Yes.
Next to the Great
Much better
Cinephile
theater.
video store. It's always fun because it takes a bit of a trek to get there. Anyway, without further ado, welcome to the show, Bob.
Thank you.
Bob, and I will point out, not to embarrass him, but it took so long, I think, because you didn't really understand the podcast thing.
Yeah, I'm not really.
I still don't know.
I don't even have a cell phone, so I don't know what the whole podcast thing is. It's like a
You don't
radio
have a
show.
cell phone?
No.
I am so impressed with you now,
Yeah.
sir. I don't know how I would survive in LA without one. I don't
Yeah.
know anybody else.
Much
that can.
wiser than all of us.
Yes.
Well, you know
Oh my
what?
God.
I mean, like if somebody needs to get a hold of me, they can leave a message on my answering machine. They can wait the 20 minutes till I get home, and I don't need to
your email's
Yeah,
not too
you're
bad.
on email.
Yeah, I'm on email, so all the time.
I mean, in another movie we talk about a lot on the show, like it's just weird because it was Vic, actually, funnily enough, which,
Oh, yeah.
which is
Oh,
the short.
yeah.
But so I want to
We
kind of go
love
back to
Vic.
the start, and in terms of, we'll wait on the editing, but start with Grindhouse Releasing, because obviously you had to have met Sage somehow and created this thing. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about how the company began?
Well, it was weird because it was a weird day where a lot of things happened that day. I was friends with Bill Lustig, and he called me. We had seen this movie Massacre Mafia Style, aka The Executioner. He had a VHS of The Executioner, and
I've got that.
said, "You've got
I
to
do
see
too.
this. You've got to see this movie. This movie is so incredible." And so I went over to his place and we watched it, and just thought it was unbelievable. He goes, "Yeah, it was made by this guy Duke Mitchell," and I go, "Yeah, that name sounds familiar." I go, "Oh yeah, the guy Bela Lugosi meets a Brooklyn Gorilla. I didn't know him from that, and I didn't really know him from anything else." And he goes, "Oh yeah, but you got to see this movie. It's this unbelievable '70s weird crime movie." So I went over to his place and we watched it and just laughed all the way through and said, "Man, we got to try to find this guy." And Bill goes, "Yeah, I'm gonna find him." So I kept calling saying, "Hey, Bill, did you ever have any luck?" And he goes, "No, I'm still looking. I'm still looking." So one day I got a phone call and it was Bill saying, "Hey, I didn't find Duke Mitchell, but I found Duke Mitchell's son. He actually lives in an apartment that I can see from my apartment." Wow. And literally lives right around the corner. Bill's on Fountain Crescent Heights, and this guy Jeff is literally one block over. Huh. So Bill said, "Come on over. We're going to go meet this guy, and we're going to see if he's got the Executioner, and if he does, we're going to try to get it, and maybe we'll try to get it and put it out or something." So I went over to Bill's place and got there, and Bill said, "Hey, I want to introduce you to my friend Sage Stallone. He's a friend of mine. He's going to go over there with us and meet Jeff." And so that was actually the first day I met Sage as well. And we went over and met with Duke Mitchell's son Jeff. And of course, it turned out Duke had died in '81, but his son Jeff lived in this apartment building and in Hollywood. And we went there and said, "Look, we're huge fans of your dad. We love his movie, The Executioner. We don't know if you have any film elements or anything, but if you do, we'd love to put that movie out." And he goes, "Well, sorry, you guys, I don't really know what happened to that movie. My dad made it, and kind of lost track of it, and I don't really have any elements." But he said, "I've got this other movie that my dad made that he never finished." And we said, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah, it's this weird movie. It's called Gone with the Pope." And he said, I've got all the elements. He said, I think I have everything. I've got all the negative. I've got the sound and all the film." He goes, "If you guys want to try to take it and do something with it, go ahead."
Wow.
So we went down to his parking garage, and he had one of these storage cupboards over where the cars are parked, and he took off the padlock, and there were all these old boxes that we dug out. It was maybe 10 boxes that had all the negative, all the sound rolls, everything basically. And that's how I met Sage, and that's how we.
But how come it took so long even to get Massacre up? What was the process?
So that was in '95, right? And now it's
about to come out.
2015,
and 20 years later.
Yeah, no, literally. So we got the movie, and Sage's mom had directed a short movie, and she was working on it over at Universal. She had a little editing room set up there with a flatbed and some benches and everything else. So Sage and Bill and I went over there, and we took over the flatbed, and there were reels of a cut of the movie, basically a rough cut. It was a really rough assembly, and we just started threading them up on the flatbed and running through the reels, and it was it was rough. I mean, it was like really, really rough. I mean, the film was like really faded and scratched and splicey, and the sound was really bad, but it was like hilarious, you know. It's like, but the movie was in really rough shape. I mean, everything was like really long. It was 18 reel rough cut, which like they were film reels, which are like 10 minutes each, but it was like basically an assembly. And of those 18 reels, I think we were missing like 4 of the reels out of the middle. So like reels like 12 through 15 were missing, and then totally we didn't have anything for those. So we started looking through it, and it just seemed like it was going to take a lot of work to basically get into shape. And it was like, well, man, this is probably going to take like a year to get this thing done. It's like, and of course, it ended up taking like 15 years or something. I mean, we finally finished it. How does the image end
up looking so good? Because to me, it looks like a brand new film.
Well, I mean, it was work print, so it was cut on like a moviola, and it was like scratched up, and it had all these like serrated splices and everything else, and it was really faded. But when we actually went back to the original negative, it was pristine. It was Kodak negative, and it's really says something about film and film negative. The fact that something can be stored in some guy's garage for 15 years under like no climate control, and everything was perfect. I mean, there were definitely like problems in the original photography. Yeah. You know, like things were out of focus, or there were camera scratches, or
and I've talked about it on the show. That's one of the things that makes me realize. I mean, not to to your horn, but how great an editor you are, because the inclusion of there's a scene at the start where he's saying goodbye to all these prisoners, and it's soft focus, and the inclusion of that, I think that's one of the most emotional parts of the whole movie, and completely changes it from other like mafia movies. Yeah, but like a lot of people would just excise that straight away. They'd be like, that's unusable.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because when we were watching the film initially on that flatbed in Sage's mom's editing room, we got about halfway through, and Bill just kind of lost interest. He goes, I don't really see anything here. I mean, that's kind of like Bill. I mean, Bill's great, but he doesn't have like the world's longest attention span, and it's like very pragmatic. So it was like, I don't want to be involved if you guys wanted to kind of take this, and I think this is going to be a pain in the neck, and I don't think it's ever going to like turn out. And so, I mean, for me, I always have sort of like an attitude of like, let's try, man. Let's try to let's work on it. Let's make it work. So we just basically on weekends or when I was between editing jobs, if I had a couple of weeks or a couple of months here and there, or nights, sometimes I would go into my garage and like work on it. I had an editing set up there and mostly worked on film. Put the thing on film, and we had all the trims. So, I mean, even though it was like this long assembly, I mean, it basically just needed to be cut down because it was like a first assembly. There was a scene where they go skiing in Big Bear. And that was literally a full reel of the movie. Yeah. And he just basically put everything in without any intention of leaving it that way, because actually it turns out that the two guys who were the original editors, he started with a guy named Bob Layton, who has gone on to become this incredible editor. He's cut all of Rob Reiner's movies, starting with Spinal Tap.
Oh, wow.
And,
interesting.
And all the Christopher Guest movies.
Oh, wow.
Like Best in Show. I mean, all those movies this guy had cut. So he was the original editor, and it was like his first movie. He had come over from England and was working at a sound house. Actually, he was working for Matt Simber, who's a producer. And he was editing sound effects for Matt's movies. And I think that's how he met Duke. And Duke said, "Oh, hey, you know how to work a movie? I've got this movie that I made. Do you want to come over and like work on it?" He would go over to Duke's house at night after he was done working at Matt's all day and edit the movie, like whenever he had a few hours here or a few hours there. And then the second guy was this guy, Robert Florio, who's gone on to become an Emmy Award-winning editor of like CSI and all these shows.
That's crazy.
Yeah, does a lot of
did you ever get a straight answer why it didn't get finished?
Those guys, I talked to a lot of people, including Peter Santoro, who is the director of photography, who's become a close friend of mine and helped me finish the movie. And no one really knew. I really think it was that jail scene. Because I think Duke was shooting on weekends or whatever, whenever he got money together. It was like totally self-financed, shot on short ends. He would rent a camera on, a Thursday night, so you could get like basically a 3-day rental. So you'd have it Friday, have it the weekend, and then return it on a Monday. So you'd get a 3-day rental for
which is still the case.
Yeah. And shooting on like little short ends of film and everything else, and basically whenever he had a chance, he would shoot. And the last thing that he shot was that jail scene, and he didn't have Peter, the original DP. I think he probably maybe just like tried to shoot it himself or whatever, or had a guy who didn't know what they were doing.
Without measuring or something.
Yeah, and everything was wrong with that scene. I mean, it was such an important scene. It set up the whole movie, but it was out of focus, and the whole thing was filled with camera noise. And I think after he shot that scene, he probably got so discouraged that he just kind of put the movie aside and maybe was hoping to reshoot that scene at some point, maybe shoot some other stuff, but...
Did his money come from nightclubs gigs? Or?
Yeah.
He was like allowed for people to know he's like a singer.
A nightclub performer.
Yeah.
And that was his main thing for years. He played like 4 or 5 shows a week, played at clubs in L.A., he played Palm Springs, Las Vegas, and was a singer. He sang, he told jokes, he did bits on stage, he had would basically perform in nightclubs.
Yeah, the parts you've just heard, if you're like listening for horror and you haven't heard of these movies yet, you're going to be like, oh, I don't really understand what I'm talking about. Watch these movies.
Watch them.
And then listen to this, because the thing about this character is you kind of become obsessed with them once
really
you watch
do.
these movies.
Just as a character.
Like, I mean, Gone with the Pope has become one of my favorite films I've ever seen.
And I'm so glad you said that,
it's hard
because
to explain why.
Because for years, I mean, just going, we got so discouraged with that movie. I mean, I got discouraged. Sage got discouraged, and of course, Bill got discouraged early, but I mean, it just, we didn't know after all this work whether anybody would be interested in seeing it, because the movie is so rough in a lot of ways and like technically has a lot of problems. I mean, that's why, in a weird way, I don't think he was able to finish the movie because there were so many technical issues that he couldn't have fixed in the mid-'70s. He couldn't have got rid of the camera noise. He couldn't have, I mean, we were able to go through and reframe the shots digitally and put things a little back into focus.
I feel like your modern sound design did a lot for that film.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
the effects and everything.
Yeah, but I mean, we tried to make it seem like a 70s. I mean, not go overboard. I mean,
it fits still with Massacre.
But we really spend a lot of effort and money and time cleaning things up. I mean, trying to make things sound good.
Did Bill end up seeing the film?
Yes. Yeah. He came to the premiere.
Does he like it now?
Yeah, he loved it. It's like
that's cool.
Yeah, now he wants another piece of it. But I just think Duke could have never finished it, and got discouraged, and tried to do this like tribute to Jimmy Durante, which was this weird one-man show that he did he plays Jimmy Durante, and made that and tried to sell it to television, didn't really have any luck, and then in around 1980 or 81 he got lung cancer and died shortly thereafter. So never got a chance to see the movie finished.
And you'll see what makes it special is Duke. I mean, there's a saying about his personality, honesty, the weird racism that always has. It's not like straight racist. It starts racist and it ends like with a weird caring quality. It's
unbelievable. Yeah, and I think he was. That's the way those guys were at that time.
Oh yeah.
They.
A more realistic.
Mafia, but I also think he was playing the role of a bad guy. Right. I mean, who gets redeemed at the end. Yeah. So even though he's really like horribly racist with this black woman character, he's still like it ends up being like a warm scene at the end in a weird way.
Yeah. It's a really interesting.
It should kind of show his good side as well. And
so it's surprising. It's continually surprising.
There's so many surprising things in that movie, and that's what I always loved about it. Yeah. I mean, from the very start, it's like, and I showed it to a lot of my friends and enlisted them to work on it as well. So like friends of mine like Paul Hart and Jody Fidel, guys who I'd worked with for years, they came and helped me cut scenes and put it together. And so it was a real like labor of love for like a decade and a half. I mean, and it sounds like a long time, but I mean, when you're working and, you're working on it maybe a couple of weeks out of the year, it's not really a lot, but is it still
touring the film? You're going to still tour the actual print?
Yeah.
That's good. So people should look out for it.
We made a few 35 millimeter prints, and it should really be seen on the big screen.
Yes.
And for years, I would tell people it's never going to come out on video. And I always knew we were probably going to put it out, but in my head, I really wanted people to be motivated to see it on film.
Yeah.
See it with an audience, because it's like one of those movies. I think if you watch it by yourself, it might not be as good.
I feel like you're rewarding the people who've already seen it with the release. It's like you've seen it in theatrical, now
that's what it really is. That's what it really is.
It's been like an experience where like when I would meet people at like other conventions in Texas, and it was like, holy, you've seen Pope? I've seen Pope, because you had to go to a theater to see it. So it's been like a communion thing.
Well, I mean, I think I've lived in LA now for 5-6 years, and it's played 3 times as a double bill, and I missed it except for this last time that I went with Elric.
Which was amazing.
And that was just like seeing a double bill of it that way with an audience was definitely the way to appreciate it.
We had this great premiere at the Egyptian, and Dennis Bartok, who was originally the programmer there, said, "Oh, hey, if you ever finish that movie, we'll play it." I always kind of took it with a grain of salt, and then he left, and this other guy, Grant Moninger, took over, and I finished it. And I called Grant, and I said, "I don't know if you're going to honor what Dennis said, but I have this Duke Mitchell movie that was never seen, and I want to premiere. And he goes, yeah, sounds great, man. Let's do it.
Yeah, well, Grant's the reason I got to do the Underground Festival.
Yeah, no, so
like
those
that.
guys are great, and we ended up surprisingly like packing the place, which I was worried that we were going to show it and like 10 people would show up, like my friends and like, a few, like 3 or 4 stragglers.
Yeah.
But we actually did really well.
Well, I remember seeing the original trailer and thinking that it had the tone of one of those, it's going to be a so bad it's good movie.
Yeah.
But then it's just,
actually
it
good.
transcends that by far.
Yeah.
Like,
So good, it's great.
Yeah,
it's
so
like,
good. It's a different. Well, let's go back to obviously that was the impetus how you met Sage and started. How did you guys decide we're going to start a company, Grindhouse Releasing? How did you get the first prints? Like, how do you start something like this?
Did it start initially as just like a theatrical thing, like touring prints of quote unquote Grindhouse movies?
Well, we always wanted to make theatrical like a priority.
Yeah,
and we still do. I mean, like I think we're the only company that's still like really. I mean, every week we have. Our films are playing somewhere. If you go to our website, we've got Cannibal Holocaust playing like, in Chicago or Pittsburgh or like Boston or someplace. The Beyond is playing in 2 or 3 places. Massacre Mafia Style, I think it just played in Austin last week and mostly on 35 millimeter. Cool. But, we've got dozens of bookings happening every year. I mean, or hundreds. I mean, we're touring with Evil Dead. So my background is theatrical and, seeing movies on the big screen. So that was a big part of it for me. And, Sage was more into like the video thing. I mean, he was a little younger, but was still committed to the theatrical as well. But really, I have to give credit to him because he was right a couple of months after we got going with the Pope. He was going over to Rome to do a movie called Daylight with his dad.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
His dad, Sylvester Stallone. They were shooting at Cinecittà in Rome.
I had no idea that was shot on a stage.
Yeah, it takes place in the Holland. It takes place in the Holland Tunnel in New York.
Yeah.
This is like this disaster movie, like Poseidon Adventure that takes place in the Holland Tunnel, but it was all shot in Rome. And so he was going over there, and he we were talking. He goes, "Yeah, I'm going to try to get some movies when I'm over there." He goes, "I love The Beyond, and I'm going to try to get that. I'm going to try to get like City of the Living Dead, and let's start a company and let's start putting out movies."
Oh, that's awesome.
And I said, yeah, that's great. And definitely, man, I'm on board with that because I'd always wanted to do it anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, before I came out here, I worked for a distributor in Michigan, like a low budget independent sub distributor. And we handled a lot of like drive-in stuff like, Invasion of the Blood Farmers. And he handled like a lot of the Italian stuff originally, like Demons and Gates of Hell and City of the Walking Dead and Night of the Zombies and all that kind of stuff. I mean, because I always loved that stuff. I always went to the drive-in as a kid to see that stuff whenever I could, or drove 70 miles. Like I lived in a small town. When I saw Pieces, I actually like drove 70 miles to see it because the small town I lived in didn't get anything. So I was like really committed to like movies and seeing them.
That's crazy to imagine you like young seeing Pieces and then years later Pieces is one of the films.
Well, that's why, because I was like so obsessed with that movie. It's like after we started Grindhouse, I was like, man, I got to try to get Pieces. It's like I was so obsessed with that movie because it was a movie that like delivered on all levels. It had this incredible poster and a tagline saying, you don't have to go to Texas for a chainsaw massacre. Pieces. It's exactly what you think.
Well,
it
I always
is.
say to people, if you start a movie great or you end a movie great, you've won. And that movie starts as good as any film in cinema and ends as crazy and everything in the middle is very patchy. But it's
but I mean, literally, it's one of the most entertaining movies ever made. And if you see it with an audience, it's unbelievable, you know. And I think when I saw it originally, it was like me and like 2 winos in the audience because it was like a Tuesday like afternoon show at like a shopping center.
Isn't that one of those stories? I can't remember. Isn't that one of the ones where the producer like kind of disappeared on the film? And, like, kind of ran.
Ed Montoro, who was the distributor, like disappeared.
Was it harder to find the rights because of that?
Yeah, it was hard to find the rights, but actually, some friends of mine in England like
tracked it down.
Tracked it down, and it was owned by. Turned out it was owned for America by this guy named Steve Manasian, who was one of the producers of Last House on the Left and Friday the 13th. Yeah. And the rights were also kind of a little bit tied up with this woman, Corliss Randall, who was the widow of Dick Randall, who was a producer who had produced a lot of stuff like Don't Open Till Christmas and things like that. And he was one of the producers on the movie. So I ended up getting in touch with Steve Manasian, and he said, yeah, I've got all the rights to the movie, and if you're interested, I'll make a deal with you. He wasn't doing anything with it. He got, he was getting older and felt he had gotten ripped off by this guy Ed Montoro, didn't make any money. Mm-hmm. And he goes, I think there might be, he kept saying, yeah, I think there might be still some money in this movie. I think he might do all right. And we ended up when at the end of the day, we ended up making the deal for perpetuity. So I own that movie forever, which is great.
Crazy.
Yeah, it was originally like a 10-year deal. And he goes, yeah, I'll tell you what, if you're interested, I don't know, but for X amount of more money, I'll give you perpetuity on the movie. And I go, are you kidding?
So does that include if you wanted to remake the film?
See,
if somebody approached you?
That's a little bit of a gray area, but potentially, yeah. I mean, definitely, yeah.
Wow.
But
so just tweet us your pitches.
Yeah.
We'll field them.
But it's like remaking pieces. I mean, how can you remake something as great as that?
Yeah. The opening scene could be copied though. The opening scene's amazing. That scene like blew me away because I wasn't expecting it.
Yeah, me too.
I have to rewatch this.
Also, I put up my poster every Halloween at Jump Cut.
It's such a great poster. The artwork is incredible. And like I said, any movie that has not only one but two great taglines.
Yeah. Whether it shows theatrical or not, I have friends over and have a Pieces party, and I make the flyer. And I'm like, it's awesome. A Pieces party. It's exactly what you think it is.
That's funny.
So I love that.
Cool.
Wow, I need to rewatch Pieces.
Guys.
Come on, I haven't seen.
And we got to play it again at the Beverly or something because that movie was so entertaining. We actually recorded the crowd and we had the track on the disc.
Yeah, because I remember it kind of pissed off some people last year at Beyond Fest when they put a different score. I know a lot of people who walked out mad because they wanted.
Well, there's this guy.
Some weird experimental thing.
Yeah, there's this guy. He goes by the name of Embardo. His name is Matt, and he actually approached me originally because he says I want to do this, and
he did Chainsaw too.
Yeah, and I gave him the rights to do it, and I thought it was cool. It was like a weird, cool experimental thing, but at the same time, I wish he could have figured out a way to like include the dialogue, we can't find those elements.
I guess for something like I did see a bit of his Chainsaw one, and it was cool. But I got the feeling like if you've seen Pieces, that would be fine to show up. Mm-hmm. But if you're bringing your friend to see Pieces,
it's really not the way to see it because there's so much of Pieces is like just the off kilter dialogue and the weird like over the top acting and everything.
Did when Sage came back, so Sage returned with these movies, and you.
So Sage was over there, and he was calling me, of course, and it was like, oh yeah, I'm going to be meeting Fulci,
my God.
And he was so excited, and he ended up like hooking up with Fulci, and they became like really close friends.
Wow. I thought I heard he got like some of the effects people from Fulci's movies to work on Daylight or something like that. Like that Daylight trip apparently was where he made a lot of those.
Yeah, he did.
Connections.
Yeah, totally. And so he found Fulci and ended up becoming like, really close friends with Fulci. And he just told me this hilarious story where somebody was playing like House by the Cemetery at like one of these little theaters. It was like a kind of a revival thing, like a cult thing in Rome, and he was there with Fulci, and like Fulci like kept talking all the way through it. And people going, "Shh, quiet!" And they didn't realize it was like Fulci.
Because he wasn't dressed like a Cat in the Brain character.
Yeah, he didn't have a film
because he didn't dress like that. He wore that jacket.
Oh my God!
I got the jacket.
That flannel jacket. You have that jacket.
I should have worn that jacket. I love that.
Oh my God! I just want to touch it.
Yeah,
that's my all-time favorate costume of a character.
That jacket is so incredible. But yeah, so I mean, he and Fulci became like really close friends, and he found out who was distributing the movies. Was the sales agent, so he went and met with them, and originally got the Beyond and City of the Living Dead wasn't available at the time, so we had an option for that. But Sage said, "What else do you have?" And they said, "Well, how about this, or this, and Cannibal Ferox?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, let's get Cannibal Ferox." So he came back with the Beyond and Cannibal Ferox.
And that's kind of how you launched.
Which is incredible, which was a great start. So initially...
how did Cannibal Holocaust, because Cannibal Holocaust obviously had so many problems in Europe and, just so many stories around it.
Yeah, that came a few years later. I mean, so he got back and he had those two movies and he said... Well, now that we have to go back over to Rome and work on getting the elements together. So he and I went back over there.
Oh, wow.
And we're there for like 6 weeks working with the labs. We met with anybody who could to find like whatever the best elements we could. And we basically spent like 6 weeks getting everything together, finding the best negatives, finding the best soundtracks, getting the stuff transferred, and which is weird because you could see how little regard they had for the movies because the Beyond was at Technicolor in Rome, which is Technicolor Rome is supposed to be like one of the best labs in the world, and so we went over there to inspect the original camera negative, and I put it on a bench and I'm winding through it, and I get like halfway through reel 2, and there was a big tear through the film.
Wow!
And it was in like a dirty can and everything else. And you could tell that these guys just had like such a low opinion for these kind of movies, even over there. So I called the guy over, like this one of these technicians in the lab, and I pull him over. I show the tear in the negative, and he goes, "Oh, don't worry." So he takes this piece of splicing tape and just like slathers it on the negative, rubs it down like with his finger with a bunch of bubbles, and goes, "Oh, bueno." And it's like,
oh man.
So it's like they didn't care, and these guys were all like smoking in the same room with the negative and everything else, and it was like such a weird thing. Huh. But
so you might have rescued some of these films
in
a weird way, yeah. Because, so we met with the DP of the Beyond, and he came over and timed the movie for us to make sure the colors were correct, which was great. Huh. And then he oversaw the transfer that we did in Rome, which ended up to be a disaster just technically. So we had to end up redoing it here, but we had this like color pass. But like everything in Rome is like, there are like a lot of them are like con men, and like the equipment's not good, and you can't trust them to like, do anything right technically. It's like, it's really hard to make a movie there or like do anything with a movie there. Because they have a different attitude. It's like things were just dragging out. We thought we'd be there a couple of weeks, and we ended up being there 6 weeks. And we kept calling this guy, Nicola Vinci, who was the guy we bought the movie from, and saying, we go over to the lab and we're supposed to look at the negative, and then we get there and they say, oh, we haven't even pulled it yet. Come back on Friday or come back next week. So everything is like this attitude of like, and he was going, why do you want to rush? Go to Capri for the weekend, relax, you're in Rome. It's like I'm coming from America. It's like I'm used to like calling the lab. They tell you to come down an hour. You go through, you get the stuff, and you see a print the next day. But like everything was like on a slow motion schedule. So, but there's worse places to be than Rome. If you're going to be there for like 6 weeks and hanging out with Sage, it was like cool. So,
did the rights work? Like, do you just have the American rights say to the Beyond?
Yeah,
because somebody else has it out of the UK.
North American rights.
Okay.
Cannibal Holocaust, North American rights. Mm-hmm. And so while we were over there, we were meeting with this distributor, Nicola Vinci, and he gave us a bunch of VHS tapes of like stuff that, you should look at this. And a lot of it was like really bad, like Italian, like sex comedies and stuff like that. But one of them was Cannibal Holocaust. Oh, wow. So I had seen it already. Sage hadn't seen it. And I go, oh man, this movie's incredible, because I had seen like a bootleg that I got from Chaz Balin or something. And so Sage watched it, and like we both agree that should be like our next acquisition, because the movie is like incredible. Mm-hmm. And we just knew that, of course, who else was going to put it out at that time, and it was such a coup to get it.
And to put that out in America, you don't have to jump through any hoops, really.
Yeah, like,
it's not like in the UK where you have to go through.
We had problems because, well, first off, it just took forever to get like an acceptable print. And, we got the first print back from the Italians, and it had a scratch all the way through the reels, like typical. And then, of course, they tried to claim that we scratched the print, and it was a big deal going back and forth. And so finally, we ended up getting it took like a year to get like something acceptable to like even do a transfer, But in the meantime, we wanted to play the thing theatrically. So, we started calling around, and at that time, Blair Witch had just come out. So
the found footage had come recycled.
It really opened a door. I figured, in order to get it played theatrically, because there was a point of reference. People had never heard of Cannibal Holocaust, but I could say, this movie Blair Witch Project was a ripoff of Cannibal Holocaust. It was the originator of the found footage thing. So, like, Blair Witch Project was this like huge hit at the New Art. I went and saw it at the New Art. Speaking of the New Art, and people were literally lined up around the block. I hadn't seen anything like it since like Star Wars, which was so weird because the Blair Witch Project.
What's the first internet? It's the first film to use the internet.
I wasn't really into it, but
it was a viral film.
I feel the same way as you. So
I've said 20 really good seconds at the end of that movie.
But overall, it was like kind of a ripoff. But I respected the fact that it was like got people so hyped up to see something that was like so marginal. Basically because it was like kind of mimicking Cannibal Holocaust. So I called the guy at Landmark, which is the New Art is part of the Landmark chain, and said, we've got this movie Cannibal Holocaust that's like the originator of Blair Witch. And he goes, oh yeah, I've heard of Cannibal Holocaust. And I go, well, this movie's pretty rough. But I would really love to play it in all your Landmark theaters, because they've got theaters throughout the U.S. And he goes, yeah, I'm familiar with the movie. And we're Landmark. We just played the 25th anniversary of Caligula uncut. And I go, yeah, okay, cool. So
hey, there's fisting in that.
Yeah. So
on the wedding, no less.
And I said, yeah, I was there opening night. I love that movie. So he said, well, look, send me a VHS cassette and I'll check it out. And so I sent it off to the guy, and he goes, I'll call you after I see it. So I'd send it to him and waited, never heard back, never heard back. Like a couple of weeks, like a week went by, and I said, I better call him because he's like local. And so I called, left a message, no response, called again, left a message. Like for a period of like 3 weeks, I kept like leaving messages. Hey, it's Bob Murawski from Grindhouse Releasing calling about Cannibal Holocaust. We have, we had the print, we were ready to go. And like the 10th time I called, he picked up the phone accidentally. And I go, hey, Cannibal Holocaust, what'd you think? I sent you the cassette, you said you were into showing it. He goes, there was no way that any theater in the Landmark chain, I probably shouldn't name the name, but will ever play this movie. And I said, well, what's wrong? He goes, I don't even think I need to discuss the reason. He goes, he said, I just don't even really want to get into the details. I don't want to talk about it, but we'll never play this movie. And thank you for considering us, but this is not for our chain.
Thank you for showing me the limits of what.
Wow.
And then I got off the phone and I was in my apartment in Hollywood, and the print of Cannibal Holocaust was like sitting in the middle of my apartment living room floor in these big black plastic cans, and I was looking at this print going, man. I was actually like feeling like kind of dirty myself. It's here's these guys play like Salo, 120 Days of Sodom, and they'll play they play all these hardcore films, and they played Maniac, and it's like as a midnight show, and here's Cannibal. And it's like, well, maybe there's something wrong with me. It's like I know this movie's hardcore, and maybe I've become a little jaded, and it's like a hard movie, but I kind of got swept into my own hype of thinking that like it was like a mainstream movie,
And you never got an answer? You just think it was the animal stuff?
It was the animal stuff. It was like a lot of the stuff, but I think it was mostly...
we talked about it.
But but the end of the story is they've ended up playing it. Like everybody's played it now.
Yeah.
And
you played it in a shopping mall not long ago. I remember reading
it's played everywhere. And it's played in a lot of the landmark theaters, and it's been still playing at them. It's playing, we've had hundreds of play dates. And the weirdest thing of all is Best Buy had it on their shelves.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And to think that, like to be this thing that was like thought of like almost like a snuff pornography would be on the shelf of Best Buy, and they moved like a few thousand units. I mean, they made us change the cover, but still Best Buy like had it.
Did they make you put anything on the front that says like,
No, it's like people have become. I mean, we put that ourselves as hype.
The first DVD release.
Oh, of course. Well, that down at the bottom.
Yeah, and we put that in all of our releases just because it's on the beyond. I mean, that comes from the days of like Dawn of the Dead or all these unrated movies or Pieces or like all these movies that would like Nightmare or Maniac that would really hype the there's no sex in this picture, but there are scenes that make it be considered shocking. No one under 17.
The interview on it, I was saying is like, well, I have two favorite special features. The Bill Lustig, David Gregory directed the one on Joe Spinell on Underground, just a beautiful film.
I love Joe
it's
Spinell.
The interview with the actor who plays the director in Cannibal Holocaust, where I think Gallagher fell asleep at one point.
Palo York. It's funny because Sage tracked him down. He was up in Palo Alto. He teaches at Stanford.
Oh wow! I didn't know that. Wow, that's crazy.
Carl York is his name. And
what's he teach? Do you know?
He was teaching like screw writing and other stuff, and he worked for a while as an actor and had a few bit parts and never really kind of broke through, and it was in a couple of TV shows, and I think he has a little part in like Nighthawks and some like some other Apollo 13. He's like one of the guys in the big room.
Weird.
But
his viewpoint on that is just
when Sage called him, he literally hadn't thought of the movie in like 20 years, and like it was like totally like was something that he was vividly remember doing it, but like never thought like anybody would see it, and was kind of like ashamed of the movie. And it's like, really, you guys are going to put that out? And like, which is the reaction of a lot of these guys, And I mean, we went up and he was like mostly just like amazed that like people were like interested in this movie, and then. Started doing some of these conventions, and then like hundreds of people are lining up trying to get his autograph.
Oh, yeah, he'd be one of the people I'd want to most meet.
I would want to talk
and he's so cool. He's like the coolest guy in the world. And we went up with John Gulager, and John had just been on like Project Greenlight, doing Feast. So he was. It was so funny because we were out like shooting York like on the street. Sage wanted to shoot some stuff with this new 16mm camera that he got, smoking and like walking in slow motion and stuff. And John was out there shooting, and people were like driving by going Gulager. And like Sage was like see Sage Stallone like always like kind of wanted to be the center of attention. Here like John had become like this fake celebrity like for this short period of time because of this project.
But he told me he fell asleep in the middle of the interview.
But that was a funny thing. So John, at one point in the interview, the camera like starts to dip down and like Yorkos are like right out of frame, and then they kind of suddenly like jerks back up. And that's because John had fallen asleep because we were up all night the night before like getting ready and driving. We got up early and like everything else, and it was great. I mean, this guy.
It's one of the most incredible remembrances of anything I've ever heard because his viewpoint is just so different. It's like I didn't know if I was in a snuff film.
Yeah,
like, there's moments where I'm not sure why I'm in Italy, and we signed a contract saying we had to disappear after the film was because they had to appear dead after the movie was wrapped. They had to disappear off the planet. Couldn't take gigs. They all signed it. And so I mean, to me, it's just it's one of those movies that I had forgotten. I saw it when I played at the New Bev last with, and I hadn't seen it on the big screen before, and I'd seen it on video, but only kind of remembered bits of it. And I found it like to be still one of the hardest films I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah.
And we were talking about it. It's because it's the smoke and mirrors. Because of the turtle, you buy all the other violence to the woman. You buy the violence to people because suddenly everything feels real.
Yeah.
And it's a trick. It's an amazing magic trick. And it's just, I don't know, it's still a really powerful
It's the muskrat.
film.
It starts with the muskrat.
Yeah,
and then
the
it
animal stuff is horrible and indefensible, but I mean, that's why he did it. And it's like, and like, all those guys, like from Robert Kerman to Diodato, it's like every time I met with those guys, it's like, oh, you should cut the animal stuff out. You guys shouldn't release with the animal stuff. Let's just cut the animal stuff out. And it's like I said, no way. There's no way we're going to cut the animal stuff out. It's part of the movie. It's like I would no more cut that out than a scene that I thought was like boring or like anything else or whatever. It's like I don't believe in censorship. So we did put this like kind of. Some people accuse me of being a sellout for putting it this like animal cruelty free version where like we'll automatically jump over those scenes if you choose that option. Like through some.
I think that's fair because some people can't watch it.
No, see, I can't watch it.
I can't watch it either. And the weird thing was when we were fixing up the sound, literally at the 11th hour when I was checking the disc, I discovered that the muskrat scene was like totally out of sync because when me and the sound guy were fixing the tracks and everything else, we would always look away.
Yeah.
And it was like 8 frames out of sync, and it became this like emergency that that we should have known about if we had actually been watching. But like every time it would come out, we would sort of look away. And so that stuff is horrible.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Of course I feel bad for that. I'm a vegetarian, so and
but I think what Elric is saying is like I think it's important to make the ending as effective as it is seeing that kind of like when I first saw it in Chicago on the big screen for the first time, and that stuff was very difficult, the animal stuff. But then when you get to the ending, it's like your mind is so used to seeing it for real that when you see it happening to people, you're like, did they just kill them?
I mean that's obviously the intention, and it doesn't justify it, but I mean that is what it does, and it was the creative decision, and at that time, people were raised on farms. I mean, animals are killed, and
Why did you do the version with the cut with those scenes cut for the DVD? Is it because I've heard so many people say over the years, "Oh, I'd watch it if it didn't have that." Like was that the motivation?
No, we did it on the DVD.
Yeah. But it's
the animal cruelty-free version,
But that's why you did it, is because
mostly because it wasn't so much like people. It was at that point it was like Diodato, Robert Kerman, like really like being against that stuff, saying you guys should really cut that stuff out of the movie. And I just thought, well, let's at least give people the option.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And I thought it would be a good way to like, kind of do it without doing it.
As sad as it is, because I used to show this in my class when I taught horror history. I know this was one of the intense ones, but I always showed it. But I would always posit it as it's historically. This isn't the only film that did that.
Yeah,
and the
Mondo Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, and the Mondo films were so popular at the time period.
Well,
that's going way back. But even
is...
if you're looking at one of the very first films that I remember watching in film school, From Pole to the Equator, which I think is from early 20s. It's literally a white dude with a camera going around the world killing things. But it was an important film at the time. But even with this, I mean, with the 70s Mondo filmmaking, this was a big thing. So it's got its historical point.
As a vegetarian, I can say, to me, it's no different killing an animal to make a movie than killing an animal to eat it. Right. I mean, you don't need to eat an animal to live. I mean, a human being, people say, well, you have to eat it to live. It's like, no, you don't. You can get your protein from other places. I mean, so really, you're eating it for your own entertainment to have a good meal, steak, which I love meat and would love to have a good steak, but I just got to a point where I didn't believe in it morally, that it was like just I couldn't justify killing an animal for something for my personal enjoyment.
The weird thing about you saying that is that when I watched it, I almost get the feeling that was how Deodato felt, because the Americans who are killing, say, the turtle are doing it in such a it feels like they're satirizing this awful brutality of America coming in and just killing everything.
Making them the bad guys.
So it doesn't feel like he's saying, hey, this is great. It really feels like he's making a commentary.
I don't think he's ever saying this is great and this is the way of the world or whatever. He's like definitely trying to show that these are
but he's still doing
bad guys. He's still doing it. And I wish he didn't, but he did it, and it's part of the movie, so it's in the movie.
There's a little movie, probably a lot of our listeners aren't aware of this movie because one of your more obscure films called The Evil Dead. That is on your label. Was that something that came about later on once your relationship with Sam came? Or?
Yeah, Sam had a print of Evil Dead.
So let's start there. How'd you meet Sam Raimi? Because that seems like a no-brainer.
Well, I'm from Michigan, but I actually didn't meet Sam in Michigan. I didn't meet him until I came out here. A friend of mine from college was working for Sam. He was an assistant editor on, met Sam first on Thou Shalt Not Kill Except, which they were shooting in Michigan. He answered an ad in a newspaper that a friend of mine found and gave to me to give to him. And they needed PAs or whatever. And my friend Mike had just graduated and didn't know what he was going to do. Kind of wanted to work in movies. And so he ended up meeting Scott Spiegel, Josh Becker, who directed it, and Sam. And then when Sam was doing Evil Dead 2, Mike got hired on to go down to North Carolina to work on the movie down there. And in the meantime, I was still in college and, kind of working for this film distributor in Detroit at the time and everything else. And
were you aware of those films, like Evil Dead?
Of course, Evil Dead 1. I was a huge fan of Evil Dead 1. I saw it. And I was in school at Michigan State, which Sam had gone to Michigan State, and people are famously wearing the Michigan State T-shirt and everything else in Evil Dead 1. And again, these movies, it's like people didn't care about them at the time because it played. I was going to Michigan State and living in this town, East Lansing, and the movie Evil Dead opened there. And I went to the first show on a Friday, and it was like me and like 6 other people in the audience. It's like people weren't even aware that it was like had this Michigan State connection. But I absolutely loved it. And then I ran a films program in college, and we ended up showing it in 16 a couple times. But of course, I really hyped up seeing MSU students get killed and turn into bloodthirsty zombies. And we did really well with it. So I was a huge fan of Evil Dead. Saw Evil Dead 2 when it came out. Wasn't so much a fan of Evil Dead 2. People love Evil Dead 2.
Yeah, we love Evil Dead 2.
Yeah, everybody loves Evil Dead 2. And to me, it was like, I don't know.
Was it because you didn't like the humor as much as
it was too comedic, and I wanted it to be more like straight horror, and it was like too brightly lit. I was like...
Peter Denning?
Peter, I love Peter, and I work with Peter, but it was so... I don't know. It was like overly lit, man. They were like making it look like a Warner Brothers cartoon or something.
Well, it did have a cartoon.
Yeah, it was very...
I mean, there are things I like about it, but for me, it was like a lame version of Evil Dead.
Right.
So I was a little put off by that.
You're probably the opposite of the majority. That's funny.
My friend Mike had worked on it and had been really hyping it up. And
who was the editor on Evil Dead 2? The main editor?
Kay Davis.
Okay.
And who ended up helping me to get one of my first jobs when I got out in L.A. So Evil Dead 2, so I didn't meet, but then I finally met Sam. Actually, I met Sam, I think it was, I don't know, somewhere around that time. They were doing some TV stuff or something for Evil Dead. And my friend Mike was working on it. I met Sam briefly. I had come out to LA in 87. And then Sam started up Darkman, and my friend Mike got me on as a PA. Yeah. I was like a set PA. I had a walkie-talkie. They were shooting downtown, and I was one of the people in charge of saying, stop. They're shooting this helicopter scene and holding back traffic. Wow. And I worked for a few days as a PA, and then I ended up getting a job in editorial. They needed somebody to find. Sam wanted to do these weird montage sequences where the camera would zoom into Darkman's eye, and there were these crazy images, violent images of houses exploding and tornadoes, and he called them rage montages. It was supposed to be what was going on in Peyton's head, and so Mike said, "Well, my friend Bob is would be a perfect job for him because he was loves going through old film prints and everything else." So I met with Sam and Rob Tappert and got hired on to find the stock footage. And ended up, this is kind of a weird, convoluted story, but so I was on that movie for a while. I did the stock footage thing. I found all this weird stock footage and ended up staying on as an assistant editor. And then while I was on that Darkman as an assistant, I got an opportunity to cut my first movie this biker movie called Danger Zone 2. Danger Zone 3. I'd worked on sorry, Danger Zone 3. I'd worked on a movie called Danger Zone 2 prior as an assistant, and the director, who is this guy Jason Williams, who is better known to the world as Flesh Gordon. He played Flesh Gordon in the original,
he played Flesh Gordon?
Yeah, he was Flesh Gordon.
Wow.
So in the late 80s and 90s, he was like making these like low budget action movies. And so he was doing the series of like cool like biker movies called Danger Zone. So he'd done Danger Zone 1. I had worked as an assistant on Danger Zone 2. And
that's how you work your way up.
Yeah. And I was so excited to be working for this guy, Jason Williams, because I had shown Flesh Gordon when I was in college and made a bunch of money showing it in 16 millimeter. Yeah. Wow. So, and it was a biker movie. So anyway, I was on Darkman, and I got this call from Jason saying, hey, this is Jason. I'm doing Danger Zone 3. And he said, he goes, the budgets were like really low, but he goes, I remember you from like Danger Zone 2, and you were like a real hard worker. And, that's awesome. And he goes, I want to give you the opportunity to like edit your first movie. He goes, it doesn't pay anything, and it's going to be like it's low budget, but if you want to do it, the job is yours. And I go, yeah, man, sign me up. So I actually quit Darkman, went on, did Danger Zone 3, shot the movie, I edited it, we finished it, did the whole thing, did all the post, and Darkman was still going on. So I actually got back onto Darkman, and that was still happening. And then in the meantime, they were finishing the movie, and I got to do a little editing on it as well.
When did the problems for Sam? Was it during shooting or in editing where he started having studio stuff without specific?
All through, and it was mostly in editing.
It was always hard.
It was all it was
like a fight.
The studio didn't really have any respect for him. They made it miserable for him, and in the end, I think I ended up like really bonding with him because I was his only ally at the end. And, like we were like working on like trying to like get stuff back in the movie and kind of going in nights and like kind of sneaking stuff in. So
yeah, I mean it's a funny film. It still holds up. It's fun,
not bad.
But then it was like so butchered by the studio, and there were so many problems, and there were like 100 different drafts. Even before they started shooting, there were like 10 different drafts in the script, with 8 different teams of writers, and so it was one of those movies that like really had a problem from start to finish just because of the studio interference.
So people always say a director and an editor become like a confidant, really.
Yeah.
And is that why you think?
Yeah. So I think me and him and Rob Tappert, and I think it was like really what happened there, and I think. He also respected the fact that I like quit this like huge $20 million, which was a lot back in 1989 or whatever it was, Universal Picture to go like edit this like $100,000 like biker movie.
Yeah.
So so he and Rob ended up seeing that movie, and when it came time to do Army of Darkness, I got a call from Rob Tappert saying, hey, Sam and I want to hire you to be one of the...
That is a bold... I think that's a bold choice.
It was very bold. And I think a lot of it was that Sam wanted to control the movie after, like, Darkman. Mm-hmm. And he and I were actually co-editors on that movie, which is weird because he wanted to edit as well. And he had edited it in his past, like, on a lot of his short movies and, like, done a lot of stuff. So we, like, traded off on scenes, and it was cool.
And you must have learned a lot from him, too.
I did, And we were cutting on film and cutting on moviolas, and, he was cutting, like, the battle scenes, and I was cutting, like, the first half of the movie, and it was cool. It was a blast. It was, like, such an opportunity, to, like, go from, like, this guy, like, syncing up dailies and finding trims to, like, doing this incredibly like high profile movie. I mean, I thought it was high profile, but then like Universal didn't care about it. They kind of dumped it when it came out, and nobody really saw it. But now it's like one of these movies that years later, it's like people find out I worked on Army of Darkness and say, "Oh, Army of Darkness is like
and
this."
That's the reason Bruce Campbell's like has everything people say about him. It really is all because of what he does in that movie. It's the comedy in that movie. That
it really is, but Universal just was like not behind the movie, and Dino De Laurentiis produced it. He was like basically had finance at Universal. It was like a negative pickup for them, so they really didn't interfere that much with it.
But played in the drive-in in my hometown. That was one of my first dates.
Really?
Yeah,
wow, cool.
at the drive-in seeing Army of Darkness.
Do you remember what it played with?
I don't actually. I know that it was.
She wasn't watching the movies.
No, it was.
I just went to the drive-in to watch the movie. I would always go by myself, and because I just wanted to see the movie. It's
No, I don't remember the second one, but they always paired up the horror ones with some like crap comedy. So like you'd have to get through like Hope Floats to get to like the kick-ass movie. So
had you decided which the ending, like with you and Sam, was the original ending?
No,
the ending,
when we finished it, it was the ending, the post-apocalyptic ending.
Oh, and they cut that out.
And what happened was so we finished the movie, and then the movie was shelved because Dino De Laurentiis was the producer, and he was in the middle of a horrible lawsuit with Universal over Hannibal Lecter. He had made Manhunter and felt that he owned the rights to Hannibal Lecter, and then they were making Silence of the Lambs. So there was this horrible legal battle, and our movie and one other movie called Cuffs with Christian Slater. We're both like
they were the ones hurt by
tied up in the middle of this lawsuit, so they both got shelved for a year. So we finished it, and it just didn't come out. So in the meantime, I had gotten onto I was actually on John Woo's movie Hard Target, which was really cool. And
cool
Sam and Rob were producing and got me on that, which was like a dream because I was such a huge John Woo fan.
We had Lance on the show and we talked about Hard
Lance
Target.
is
That's
great.
actually one of his best roles, I think.
He was so great in that movie. I mean, for me, one of the biggest, like, coolest thrills was being the first person to get those dailies, that footage. It would come in. We were shooting in New Orleans, and I would get the film. And my guys would sync it up, and it would be like 8, 9 o'clock, or maybe like even 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And I would thread this stuff up, and I was like the first person to see it. And I was just like always so excited to see like the little bits of stuff that like Lance was doing, because he was like so incredible in that movie. There's so many little really things that just it didn't even make the final cut. He was just like so great from start to finish. It's
funny because like the idea of editing for an auteur, somebody who has like such a distinct visual style, how much do you have to go back and like become part of that style? Like, because he's got pigeons and slow motion, and there's fire and babies and shotguns and chow yun fat. Like, do you have to kind of really study how this?
That was so intimidating. But like I said, I was a really big fan of his movies. Actually, it was Quentin who got me into his movies.
Interesting.
And this was like before Quentin had even done Reservoir Dogs. I mean, we were like friends. We would hang out, and he would bring these like John Woo movies and stuff, like Better Tomorrow 1 and 2, which was
why
the first
hasn't he
ones.
watched Gone with the Pope? What's wrong with this man?
I don't know why he keeps boycotting Gone with the Pope.
You have to bring a print to his house.
I know,
and then
it's
he'll
been
watch
at his theater like 100 times. I think he would love that movie.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I think it's totally be something he would
Scorsese.
He would.
I want
into.
Scorsese to
And I
watch
want
it.
Scorsese to see it.
I think he would love. I think Duke Mitchell should have been in Casino. He should have been floating around in the background again.
But I was such a big fan of John Woo. Then the Killers came out, and then Hard Boiled.
Yeah, Hard Boiled's the best.
And it was so funny because we were down in New Orleans shooting the movie, and the weekend, like the Sunday before they started shooting, John rented a theater in New Orleans to show the crew and cast and crew Hard Boiled.
Oh, wow.
And everybody got out of that movie so intimidated because I mean that movie is like so like over the top, like unbelievable, like that one long like unbroken shot that literally chow yun fat kills like 1 million guys, and it goes from like floor to floor and everything else. And I actually found out that like when he gets in the elevator, goes to the next floor and like comes out and like shoots like 100 more guys. Well, first he starts at one floor, shoots like 100 guys, gets in the elevator, goes up to the second floor, gets off the elevator, shoots like another 500 guys. John told me that it was like the elevator was like a fake elevator, it was a set. So when chow yun fat got in the elevator, everybody on the crew like got in and like immediately like spent like the next like 2 minutes redressing, like 40 seconds or whatever, redressing that entire set. And then he got out basically into like a redress set on the same location.
Wild.
So
Amazing.
I mean, just hearing the behind the scenes stories of that movie just made it like even more incredible. But anyway, he screened the movie and people were like everybody in the crew was like, there was this like silence. It's like, wow, what are, everybody was in awe, and it's like, what are we getting into with this guy? Because it's like everything is like so impressive. He was always so frustrated when we were making the movie because of the American stuntmen. He just thought they were such babies. He would say, look, we would look at the stuff on the flatbed, and we would go, look at this, like watch this guy when he goes through the window. Because the American guys, like even though it's like candy glass, they still cover their eyes and their face. And he goes like the Hong Kong stuntmen, they would never do that. And he goes, if they would, I would like fire them. He would say, these guys would like run through like real glass or like.
Did Van Damme do a lot of his own stuff? Or
he wouldn't do any of his own stuff. He was such a baby. He was such a jerk and a baby on that movie. And I don't mind saying it because he was
haircut,
because he was like so like mean to me the whole time and like made things miserable for John and everybody else.
That's a shame.
He wouldn't. Like a huge amount, part of the movie is him riding a horse. There's a big horse chase. Like, okay, so you sign up to do a movie on a horse. He wouldn't get on the horse. He was afraid of horses. He thought the horse was going to bite him. What? So he would like kind of. He would get within like 3 feet of a horse's mouth. He would like kind of pet the horse from like behind like where the saddle is, but he would never refuse to get on the horse. So like everything with the horse was like shot with doubles, and it made things really difficult. He always had doubles like doing a lot of his fight stuff.
And he can't really hold his own against Lance. I mean, it's one of those films though where you feel like if that had been, say, Nicolas Cage, you know, if Nicolas Cage had been an action director, it's one of those films that could be a classic action movie, but because it's a Van Damme film, it's always going to be, you know, you always go to, oh, it's a Van Damme movie.
Well, and that was the problem because the Universal saw it as a Van Damme vehicle and not a John Woo vehicle.
Right.
So they, at the end of the day, they really catered to Van Damme and made it his cut. And his cut mostly involved like cutting in more close-ups of himself and more like repeating the leg kicks. And it's like, you know, the kicks, he's good at the kicking. And, but he would want to like cut it from like 4 different angles. And it was not really John Woo's style so much. Right. And more close-ups of himself and cutting out stuff from other actors that got a good audience response, because he would sit there in those screenings and just get mad when Lance would have a bit of business that the audience would like cheer or react to. You go, or Wilford Brimley. John Claude would come into the editing room saying, "We need to get rid of that stuff."
How can you get mad at Wilford Brimley?
I don't know, and we would say
showing him up. I get,
and we would say, "Well, John Claude, I mean, this is like people, and when they loved the other characters, they love the movie and they loved you. It's not diminishing from you." And he would go, "No, I need to be the center." And when they react to somebody else, he felt it diminished their love of him. So he had such a misguided idea of what a movie should be, and at the end of the day, he basically was in charge, and it was very frustrating, and it was a really demoralizing experience, that movie. For John especially, but yeah, for me having to sit there and like
think after that, I mean, because John, he hasn't done a lot.
He did Face Off, and then
Face Off was a big hit.
No, but before Broken Arrow,
so both of those did well for him. I know, but then I know, like in the last few years, I remember Paycheck with.
He ended up like getting fed up and going back to Hong Kong.
Okay, yeah,
and which I don't blame him, because. He had that kind of freedom, and he was a superstar over there.
Gareth Evans, right? Seems to be like the one guy who's kind of copying what he was with the Raid movies, Raid 1 and 2. Seems to be
exactly.
He did so well. But this guy here, I know for a fact, has been chomping at the bit with Spider-Man. Question?
I do, but I want to go back for 1 second. I don't mean to backpedal, but no, I thought it was interesting when we were talking about Darkman, because we talk about this a lot. Like when we see a movie when we're young, in context to us, we don't know about the studio problems or whatever. Like.
Especially pre-IMDb.
Yeah, exactly.
Like before all that crap.
Elric always talks about how much he loved Nightbreed when he saw it back in New Zealand on video, and yet that's one movie that Clive Barker was never happy with. I loved Darkman. I was like 13, 14 when it came out. I saw it like 4 times in the theater. So I love that movie. I'm just curious, since you were there and you guys were shaping the movie, Lynn, what was the original intent, and how different was it from the movie that I ended up loving? I mean, I'm sure I would have loved the Sam Raimi version of it, but you know what I mean?
There were just like little bits, like little character bits here and there that the studio did, like little weird things that, like the rage montages where it would kind of go into his head, and all the houses would be exploding, and earthquakes and volcanoes and everything else. They hated all that those kind of stylistic things. They just wanted it to be more straightforward.
Aww.
And I think. Part of it, like these movies, Sam's movies, like a lot of guys don't test well. Because they're like genre mixing,
Right.
People,
comedy and horror.
Yeah, comedy and horror, comedy and action, which was the case, and like weird kind of character stuff like Darkman. Is it an action movie, or is it like a romance, or is it like a superhero movie, or what is it? It's like, and so you get these test screenings, which the audiences believe in. They recruit a bunch of people in Woodland Hills or something, these kids who are going to see like some like lame comedy, and they walk in, and they start asking them questions, and would you recommend the movie, or what would you think about the movie? What would you like least? What did you like most? And then it's like they tabulate the score, and Sam's movies, for whatever reason, always kind of get a low score. And just because of the people don't really know what to make of them. Yeah. So the inclination of the studio is like, the studio wants to make something that studio would rather make a movie that like 90% of the movie, 90% of the audience thinks is like okay or good, than having like 30% think it's like incredible, like the best movie they ever saw in their life. 30% like kind of being put off by it, and the other 30% kind of thinking it was average. They really want things to be like mass appeal.
At that time, so this was 89, 90. Yeah. So Batman had just come out. So I mean, was that any sort of influence? Like, oh well, can you make it more like Batman?
Yeah, and they wanted him, because Batman was pretty straight. Yeah. Very straight, and that's why so they got Danny Elfman to score it.
Oh, that's right.
And Danny, I mean, really kind of brought the movie together with a score. Because prior to, I mean, Sam always says, "Yeah, Danny, you saved the movie," but in a way, I mean, his score kind of like melded everything together and kind of did what a score does, you know. And
yeah, the second one feels far more like a Tim Burton film. The second one feels like he's actually doing something playful, Batman 2, whereas the first one is kind of like a setup.
Yeah. But and then Universal got behind it with a really good campaign. Who is Darkman? Yeah, and they had these billboards and like, well, who is he? Liam Neeson. People didn't even know who Liam Neeson was. It was weird. It was like a question. It was like in a weird way. It was like a question with like no answer. But for whatever reason, people really responded to that campaign, and the movie ended up like being a huge hit. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, just like Sam always says, it's like death by a million blows, because it's like these little bits and moments that, he always has these kind of little gags and these little things. I mean, I just like, there were things that I just liked, like Nicholas Worth. I love Nicholas Worth. So he was in the movie, and like, he's one of my favorite character actors. Like, he knows you're alone. And he plays one of the all-time great killers in this movie. Anyway, he plays a small part in the movie. And there's a scene where he drinks this Maalox because he's like always has like heartburn, and he kind of makes us look, and it's just dumb stuff like that they had us trim off that like nobody would have noticed. But
eventually, it stops being your film. Like
it stopped becoming Sam's movie, and it's like he says, "Death by a thousand blows," and suddenly it's like it becomes this homogenous thing. So they want to get rid of it, like anything that's kind of edgy or weird or that they don't understand or that they think people won't respond to. Like a lot of the stuff at the carnival they didn't like, so that got cut way down.
Which is like what stands out.
Right. All the weird, like Drake chasing himself. I love that scene a lot. But how did, obviously there's still a couple movies between that and Spider-Man, but how, it seems like he wouldn't have gained their trust either with something like Darkman. So how do you go and I know Simple Plan's obviously a radically different movie. It's like his minimalist, thriller. So how did he even get Spider-Man? How does that even come about? How does he get chosen for that gig?
Or was it the hype off of what Army of Darkness was kind of building?
It wasn't off of Army of Darkness. It was probably more off of. Certainly wasn't off the baseball movie.
Yeah, I mean, the Simple Plan had an Oscar.
Simple Plan though was really like a serious.
The performances
movie.
Are great, but it also wouldn't say Spider-Man to me. Like Darkman's the only one that kind of has a.
And then we were doing The Gift at the time, which is also great. And
The Gift's before Spider-Man.
Yeah, I remember reading that they once he signed for Spider-Man that they were like kind of rushing The Gift to be like, we want him to start Spider-Man.
Yeah, I was on The Gift.
You shot that in Savannah, right?
Yeah,
I was living. I went to school there, so
I remember that. It was a really neat movie.
Yeah, The Gift was great, and another movie that again Paramount didn't know what to do with it. And then didn't get behind it. They at one point they even said to us, are you making a drama or are you making a thriller? You need to pick a direction. And Sam said, it's we can't do that. It's both. And we refused to change it. I think he basically had control over the cut on that one to a certain degree. I mean, it still kind of got ruined, but in some parts. But
scariest fiddler scene ever.
Yeah, Danny Elfman. But
were you involved in the show American Gothic, or was that
a little bit? Yeah,
okay. Yeah. I thought that was a really interesting show, and I'd be curious to see it now. I don't know how it would.
Yeah, I met my wife on that show. She was one of the editors, and I got brought on that to cut the title sequence and do these weird recaps and stuff like that.
If you ever edit a movie with her, you will win an Oscar. I'm predicting that now. I hope this episode plays 5 years ago.
Yeah. My one Spider-Man question is because he's my favorite superhero. I was so excited when those movies came out.
I only have one Spider-Man question.
I actually do, specifically just one. So I was obviously reading a lot about it when they were making it, when it was about to come out, and all that kind of stuff. And the thing I found interesting, which didn't, at least from what my knowledge, didn't happen on Spider-Man 2 and 3, which you also edited. But I remember Sam talking a lot about that you were cutting the picture and there was another editor not that you were working with, but another editor also simultaneously doing footage at the same time. And I was just curious, and the only reason I noticed that is because, again, I'd see trailers or TV spots, and then there'd be footage from completely different angles of scenes that are not in the movie. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting.
Well, but that's typical of TV spots or trailers. I always love when trailers have these weird different angle or a different take or something. I just think it's cool.
I thought that was the thing, was that you were working with some footage of one angle where another editor was doing another. And I just thought that was interesting. Could you explain?
In the interim between me working with Sam on the Army of Darkness, after Army of Darkness, he did Quick and the Dead. And it was like too big of a picture at that time. It was like a Sharon Stone movie, and she was like calling the shots, and I could not. He called me up and said, sorry, buddy, I can't get you on this movie. It's like too big. I don't really have any control over it. And he goes, he said, I felt bad. I'm sure we'll work together in the future, but I just want to let you know that it wasn't me. It was Pietro Scalia.
Okay. Yeah.
Quick and the Dead. And actually, my wife had worked on that too. I didn't know her at the time, but we ended up meeting years later because she worked with Sam and ended up getting on American Gothic. So if she had worked on that, and if I had done it, I probably would have never met her. So it all worked out. But and in some weird convoluted way. But anyway, so he did Quick and the Dead, and then he worked with Pietro, and then he did the baseball movie, and he had 2 editors on that for whatever reason, because I think they had a short schedule, so he worked with 2 editors. This guy Arthur Coburn and another guy named Eric Beeson, and then after they finished that, then he was doing Simple Plan, so he just hired those guys back.
And what were you doing during that period?
Bill Lustig movies.
Uncle Sam.
Yeah.
No, it's like
Uncle Sam.
No, after Hard Target, I was like so demoralized that I just like kind of didn't want to work on studio movies anymore. It's like I didn't want to so I just was working on I wanted to work with Bill. Bill was doing a movie, so I did this prison movie that Bill did, and then I did Uncle Sam with Bill, and my friend Jeff Burr did a couple movies with Jeff, who's great, and I did some music videos with my friend Tom Renoni. We did one for the Ramones, and we did one for Motorhead, and we did one for Ministry, and
that's how I ended up with Dee Dee Ramone's copy of Devil Times 5.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Brian Quinn at the New Bev.
Brian Quinn at the New Bev.
It would have been Johnny.
I very circuitously got that copy. Yeah.
I've got
Johnny.
I've got Johnny's personal copy of the Tammy Show.
Because he filmed everything. Yeah, he taped everything.
But so I was just fed up with the studio scene, and I just was in a weird way happy to be just working on low budget movies where at least you work on them and everybody's there's not a lot of interference. There's the pressure of no money, but at least you're kind of doing your own thing. And in the meantime, I'd met Sage, and we were starting up Grindhouse, and anyway, I got a call from Sam out of the blue about coming on to American Gothic to cut the title sequence. And then kind of got back in with him. And then when he was doing The Gift, he said, hey, I wanted to see if you wanted to do The Gift. But he said, I've got this different way of working. I work with 2 editors, and you're going to be working with one of my editors, this guy, Arthur Coburn. And he said, I don't know how you feel about that. Yeah, he said, you and I kind of worked together as 2 editors on Army of Darkness. But he said, this is kind of a different thing. He goes, it's a weird way of working. And he goes, you might not like it, but I don't have the guys split up the movie like we did in Army of Darkness. He said both guys do their entire cut of the movie.
Oh,
that's
they're individual.
That's what I read.
Strange.
Oh, that's what I was reading about.
And then he said then what we'll do. He said we did it on the baseball movie, and we did it on Simple Plan. And he goes, I really like to work that way because I can see a lot of options quickly. And Sam's always a guy who likes to explore a lot of different options. But I'm of the opinion that there's only one perfect way to cut a scene, right? And I don't care if there's 200,000 hours of film like there was on Hurt Locker.
Right.
I think there's one optimal cut of every scene. So, and I would like to believe that
it's your cut.
I come up with that cut, right? It's because I go through, and so it was humiliating. It's so it's I was really I was. Apprehensive to say the least, and especially because this guy Arthur Coburn was an older guy and he had a lot of big credits, and it was kind of really in with Sam at that point. So we got on The Gift, and we both did our version, and I didn't see his version or he didn't see mine, and we were both cutting simultaneously. And Sam got back and screened both versions, and I mean, I thought it was night and day.
And so you watched them both. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And which was really nerve-wracking too.
Yeah.
But we flipped a coin to see who's ran first, and his ran first, and which I didn't know whether it would be good or bad.
Right.
And then mine ran second, and I just feel I was more in tune with the movie, and and it ended up being I don't want to say it, but mostly my cut at the end of the day.
That's so weird. What did he say afterwards?
Yeah.
Does he acknowledge? Does he go, yeah, I think you're right.
No, but then what Sam he had this weird system where we'd go through the movie. So every scene we'd break it down by scene. So we'd start with the opening scene, and he would look at, I'm going to look at Bob's version, then I'm going to look at Arthur's version, and then he would do the lame thing where he would say, okay, well, I like the first 2 shots I like from Bob's version. Then I want to cross over into Arthur's cut for the next 2 shots.
Yeah.
And then I want to come back over into Bob's cut for like this part in the middle. And then I want to go back to Arthur's cut in the end. And then we get to then we go through the next scene. And then he would say, well, this one I like Bob's version altogether, or this one I like Arthur's version.
Oh, interesting.
And then we would like trade off on like versions, but it was like torturous for me, like having somebody else take my cuts and like, because then like Sam would say, oh, I like Bob's version, but in the meantime, Arthur would be taking my cut, like going, hey, Sam, you know, I think I had some different ideas here, so he would like be like ruining my cut.
Did you learn anything from the project? Like, did it help you in any way?
No.
So it's all just
it was miserable to me.
Yeah.
It was miserable because, and at the end of the day, I you know, I don't know what. So in the meantime, he had also promised Arthur already Spider-Man because we were like, he had gotten Spider-Man while we were doing the gift. So we kind of started with Arthur on that, but I don't know, just like he ended up like phasing Arthur out fairly quickly, and then it's just been me and Sam from there on in.
You guys could have just.
I'll let you draw your own conclusions about how
You're on his tempo.
yeah, whatever. But I mean, it's just like, you know, but it is interesting to see how 2 people could take the exact same material.
Oh yeah, I mean,
and like have such a different like point of view, just in terms of like even like putting in temp music.
Oh yeah,
because I was like putting in like the gift. I was putting in a lot of more like Morricone, like thriller music from the like the 70s, like you know, Four Flies on Grey Velvet, like really like, you know, cool, like dissonant kind of like
atmosphere.
Yeah, or like, you know, that kind of stuff. And Arthur was putting in like stuff from like Ron Howard movies, you know, or whatever.
Yeah.
And he just like had a different like idea of what the movie was. He just saw it as more, I don't know what he saw it as, but it just wasn't what the movie was.
So that changed Sam to just work with one editor, or were you still doing 2 on Spider-Man?
Well, then like he had already promised Arthur, but he pulled me aside and said, you know, I know you didn't really like working with Arthur, and I really want you to do Spider-Man with me. And he goes, I'll understand if you don't want to work with Arthur again, but he goes, I'm going to try to make it easy for you. And he said, really, I'm only going to have Arthur on till, you know, for a certain finite amount of time on this one.
Huh. Were you a superhero guy? Were you somebody?
I was not a superhero guy, you know. And people say, "How did Sam get the movie?" Well, he was like a huge Spider-Man fan since he was a kid. Yeah. So when he went in and met with the studio and Amy Pascal, who was the president of the studio, he came in like the world's biggest Spider-Man fan, knowing like everything about the character, but really talking about the character like it was a person, like a serious literature, passionately, and not like, oh, yeah, we're going to have like a bunch of chases and spitting the web and everything else. It was all about Peter Parker.
And you got a real actor to play.
Yeah, and he fought to get Toby. You know, the studio wanted like somebody like Heath Ledger, like a handsome kind of guy. Sam wanted like Toby and really fought to get him on. And you know, but really like understood the character, that it was like this nerdy guy, not like this guy Andrew Garfield, like, you know, who's like too cool for his own good and riding on a skateboard, you know, but like Toby, like this kind of nerdy guy, like shy, kind of standoffish, like kind of homely with the glasses and you know, because he doesn't really care, and who becomes this like reluctant superhero. So yeah, I mean, but you know, I really wasn't into superhero stuff per se.
Did it get you into that? Like,
yeah,
as
like
you're
after
getting
that.
Because like I think the only time I ever picked up Spider-Man as a kid was when he fought the Marvel Dracula. So it's like I was in the horror. I read like, you know, the horror, House of Mystery and the horror comics and like, you know, the old EC comics and stuff like that. So
Ghost Rider could have been the Ghost Rider was a missed opportunity. That felt like it could have been a real horror movie.
Twice they missed out.
But I mean, even Ghost Rider wasn't like, I mean, I picked up a couple issues as a kid. Yeah, it was cool looking, but I mean, it really wasn't a horror thing. So yeah, no, I really was not a superhero guy, but you know, I was like, I understood Sam's aesthetic, I think, and I really, I was into the characters.
Well, you have monsters. I mean, like number 2 is
Willem Dafoe. I was totally into Willem Dafoe.
Willem Dafoe is awesome.
But number 2 is like to me unequivocally the best superhero movie.
Alfred Molina's incredible.
Like Alfred Molina as the Octopus is just because that's one of those characters in the comic I would have thought couldn't be done well. It seems ridiculous in the comic. He's got
awesome.
the tentacles, and in number 2, it's just a great movie. It's a tense movie. Number 3, obviously, there's a lot happened.
But you know, number 3, I think gets a bad rap, and I mean, even Sam is down in the movie now. But there's so much good stuff in that movie, and everybody works so hard on that movie. And again,
is it because they're just forced too many? I think there's too much going on.
No, it's like for whatever reason they just wanted, you know, the guy who was from Marvel wanted to have stuck Venom in at the last minute because they wanted to be able to make another kind of Spider-Man down the Black Spider.
So it wasn't organically part of the story.
No, not at all. And Sam was never really into Venom because it was kind of like after when he was reading the comic, so he kind of put on a happy face and tried to make the best he could, but it was like there were too many cooks, there were too many people. It was like kind of like a Darkman situation again, and really,
which is interesting because 2 was so successful, and you look. I mean, 1 is still a great movie, but I look at 2, and 2 is totally Sam.
Well, the weird thing about like 1 is like we kept going, oh man, when's the bubble going to burst on this? Because it was such a big movie, and we really thought there was going to be an incredible amount of interference from the studio, and they really let Sam alone, let him do his thing. I mean, aside from like all like the battles over casting at the beginning, and ultimately they conceded that Toby was the best choice. And then once he got going, they just like really let him do it. And then 1 was such a huge hit. I mean, 1 was the first movie to make over $100 million like on its first opening weekend. It was like the first movie that broke that barrier.
That's crazy.
And now it's like movies do it like every other week, and it doesn't seem like a big deal. But that was like a huge deal, and it was such a huge hit that when 2 came around, it was like, whatever you want, Sam. And they were just like, and again, they really left us alone, and we just kind of did the movie. But for whatever reason, by the time 3 rolled around, like everybody thought that they were like the author of the other 2 movies.
Yeah, interesting.
Like all the actors were out of control, like the studio, the writers. I mean, just like everybody, and it was just like it was so difficult, and just like the script just kept getting more and more convoluted from the first version that Sam told me about. And, it's like really Sam is like the kind of guy like John Woo that you should just leave alone. You hire a guy like him. He's like an incredible director. He's like so great technically, and also like he cares about the story. Yeah. He cares about the actors. He cares about like every aspect, like the most minute aspects of sound, music, like everything, the effects. I mean, he's at every visual effects meeting and so hands-on, like more than like anybody like I've ever known. And the studio should say, look, we've hired this guy. He's like an incredible filmmaker. Let's just let him do his thing. But for whatever reason on that third movie, it just became a fiasco. And I think really just everybody just wanted to be like part of the creative process in a weird way.
And did that kill the franchise? Did that kill his like wanting to be part of Spider-Man?
For him, it did, yeah. No, actually, he still wanted to do 4. I think he wanted to do 4 really just because he wanted to like,
bring it back.
To show people that he could make another great Spider-Man movie, but it just ended up like not happening.
Yeah.
How far did he? Because you were working on 4 with him as well.
Yeah.
Like how far?
Well, actually, I wasn't. I was like signed on to do it, but I never really got on it.
Right.
But he had been in pre-production for a long, like 6 months or so, and really, I mean, they had a script and like animatics and a lot of stuff, but I just think he finally realized that it just was going to be like the same scene all over again at a certain point, and just like bailed and said
he did what I've been hoping Peter Jackson would do for a while now, which is like dial it back and go back to the roots and make a film.
Because
Peter Jackson, all that stuff you were saying about
asking
Sam,
for.
I think Peter Jackson has. I think he's lost it with the scale he's been working at. That personal filmmaking.
Yeah.
He really
like Heavenly Creatures was great.
And is a really funny filmmaker. And Heavenly Creatures is a great movie. But somewhere along the way, you start making the scale.
Yeah, because those Lord of the Rings movies are unwatchable.
The last 3 are.
the
last 3 are
they get
just
painful.
I don't even know. But they weren't meant to. They're meant to be Guillermo del Toro's.
It's like I didn't see the first 2 Hobbit movies, and I went and saw the third one because Howard Shore was there, and I'm a huge fan. And actually, grudgingly, I kind of liked it just because I could kind of put myself in the frame of mind that's like a Harryhausen movie or something. And
I mean, maybe he'll make a small film, but I would love to see him go back to the stuff he loves, And I felt that what Drag Me to Hell was like one of the most fun.
Well, that's the thing. Like after Spidey 3, it's like Sam was the way he rebounded from Darkman and did Army of Darkness. Yeah. It's like, Drag Me to Hell. Let's do this cool horror movie. Yeah. Like we're in control of the whole thing, and low budget, and just like try to scare the audience and try to like make a thrill ride. And and I wish more people had seen it when it comes out. And now like I think people have seen it.
Yeah,
it's one of those.
Again, another one of those movies where like Universal didn't know what to do with, and they tried to market it as a straight horror movie, even though it was like a lot of like weird.
Well, the thing that bummed me out about that, I mean, I love the movie, but they like did so many advanced screenings of it for free that like every horror fan I knew saw it already before it came out, and I'm like, nobody's gonna like. I mean, I'll go pay see it again, but like you already showed it to your entire audience.
Well,
like,
I think they were really hoping to get like word out or something, but they also didn't really support it that much. I mean, they put it out in a weird time. It should have come out at Halloween.
Yeah,
and they said, well, let's put it out in the summer. It'll be counter programming, so when people can't get into like X-Men or whatever is playing, we'll get the overspill. It's like you don't want to be like the sloppy seconds. You don't want to be the movie that people go see like because
come out and surprise everyone and be
put it out like Halloween. It's such an obvious time. It's like put it on the shelf and we're like wait for it. It's like so that was frustrating because it's like we just I thought it was like a really cool movie. And again, I think Universal again, they kind of just like, I haven't had a lot of like really positive experiences with that studio.
Is he still passionate about horror? Like doing
loves horror. Sam loves horror. Sam loves horror and loves like just thrilling the audience. You know, it's like, and that's why I think this Evil Dead thing is going to be so great. Was he excited
how well the Evil Dead remake did in terms of the box?
Absolutely. Yeah, and he was
that was a bold choice too, hiring a different director.
Yeah, and he was, you know, we were on Oz at the time, and we were going through a lot of like stuff with the studio, so he was totally like hands off with that guy Fetty.
Right.
He said, look, you know, I've got a lot of notes, Fetty, and here they are. You can do them if you want, but you're the director. You know, he really, Sam's like, as a producer, he's great because he like understands like the position of the director, and he's been in that position. So, you know, he'll give his input, and then like if the director doesn't want to do it, he's not going to force him.
But that film obviously is polarizing with horror fans because, you know, some of them are like, oh, but I love Evil Dead, the original. And for me, the fact that he didn't do Ash was the thing that made it work. And when I watched it, I had the same feeling I had when I watched Drag Me to Hell. Those two, in fact, I didn't have it many times in between these two films, which is just that pure viscera, pure fun. The scenes are grabbing you. You're actually feeling the hits. You know, you can nitpick it.
And there's nothing better than sitting with an audience, and that's why I love being in distribution or whatever with these movies or working on movies. It's like being in there with the audience.
The Evil Dead screening, you could have heard a pin drop. I remember that because I was like 2 days before I gave birth, and as I walked in, the publicist was like, "You're going to go during this movie. I know it."
We were hoping. Actually.
Yeah, they were hoping.
People were yelling and screaming and like cheering.
It was cool.
It was wonderful.
Yeah, and I think they really nailed it. But I mean, it was polarizing.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had problems with it because I just thought like I wish the characters were more likable and stuff. They were pretty obnoxious. And,
well, that's probably
the youth of today.
That would be the youth of today.
No, of course,
every Eli Roth movie.
You're not obviously it's way too early to tell us about the series, but as far as you know, they're still doing it, and it's all happening with Bruce. And
it's going to be great. Okay. That's all I can say. It's going to be like totally like full on everything.
But Sam's directing some of it, right?
Like he's directing the pilot.
So that's the pilot, which is going to be incredible. Sets the tone, then I'm good.
And we can hear a little bit about Poltergeist as well, right?
Yeah.
Well, because he also did some editing on, was it Monster House? The same director, right?
Gil Cannon was the director of Monster House.
And you did edit.
No, I didn't do it. I didn't work on Monster House.
So it wasn't
I didn't meet him until this movie.
And Poltergeist, because Poltergeist has been held back, so obviously some people are worried about it and stuff.
It wasn't held back because there were problems. It was literally held back because they want to be in a good releasing slot. Yeah, because they figured that and whether this is misbegotten or not, they said, well, the original Poltergeist came out as a summer movie, and we think this one is like a movie that like will appeal to like kind of across the board demographics like that one did.
And the past 2 years, I mean, like Conjuring kind of proved that you can do summer horror and have it be really successful.
I think it was a problem for Drag Me to Hell for whatever reason, because I think that should have been like a Halloween movie, and I think it was like they didn't really get behind it in the right way. But I think this Poltergeist movie, it's kind of like the original in that I think it's more of like a family oriented, but it's still really scary.
Is it the same story exactly, or is it like a new telling of a similar story?
It's a new telling.
Remake?
Yeah, it's pretty much a remake, but but it's only the same. Sam Rockwell plays the dad. I mean, it's like so it's like it's not Craig T. Nelson, so it's already going to be kind of like a little bit of a different twist on right there.
I love Rockwell; he's great.
I love him too.
Trailer
so
looks
cool
brilliant.
It was so cool to be able to work on a movie with him because I've always loved that guy.
Yeah, I mean, and Mooney blew my mind when I watched that film. I was just like, wow, this guy,
No, he's great.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So,
Chuck Barris.
But Poltergeist, like, so you worked on that from what, this year? Was the main?
Last year I was. Sam was producing it, and it was one of these things where they had an editor, and the editor actually finished, went on to another job, and we're doing some additional photography, some stuff that they actually owed, from the original shoot, because they sort of ran out of time and they needed to shoot a couple of the scenes. So they needed somebody to come on, and Sam said, "Hey, you want to come do it?" And I said, "Yeah, I mean, of course, let me take a look at it." So I looked at it and thought it was like a cool project, and met the director, really great guy. And so I came on it, and we went through the movie and fixed it up in a bunch of places. And, so it was one of these things that was, because a lot of times you get called into movies like, to recut or whatever, and it's like a real contentious situation.
Right.
And I never do those.
Okay.
It's like I get a lot of calls.
Like a ghostwriter or something.
And then they'll say, and I'll go, well, what happened to the original editor? And they go, oh, well, he didn't really understand the movie, or it's like we want to try a different direction. And that it's like they just need to tell that guy what they want to do, or it's a bad movie and they're blaming the editor and they're firing him. It's like it happens on every movie now.
Yeah.
And mostly it's because the scripts are so bad. It's like I get these scripts and I read them and I turn down the movie, and then 6 months later, I get a call saying, "Hey, remember that movie? Well, they need they need a new editor." And I'm going, "Well, I didn't want to do it 6 months ago. It's not going to be any different." And as a matter of fact, it's just like proof that the movie is bad. And it's like there's so many movies. It's like shocking. So I never do movies. It's like, or if I screen those movies, I'll just say, look, you should just bring back your original editor and have him finish the movie, or your director, or just like keep it the way it is because you're not going to change it. Save your money, but they always still want to screw around with it, ruin it, or sometimes they're ruining the movie. So there's situations where they've got something that's decent, and I'm not that guy either. I'm not going to come on and like ruin somebody's movie.
Do people approach you a lot about films, or are you mostly working with Sam? Like,
no, I signed with an agent, so it's I do get a lot of calls, to come in and like look at films, or I get offered films from the get go, and like so much. Most of the stuff I turn down just because I want to work on the Grindhouse stuff.
Right.
It's like if I get off of it, like when I got off of Oz, I had such a backlog of like all these movies, like 12 movies. It's like, and of course, it's like you get off of a big movie, and that's when you have a lot of momentum.
Yeah.
And you're coming off of like a $200-some million studio movie, and it's like you're like in the awareness, and you get offered a lot of big projects, and I just like turn them down because I got to work on Cannibal Holocaust or pieces or whatever.
What's the most footage? Just as an editing question, was Hurt Locker the most footage?
Yeah, there was over 200 hours of footage.
I imagine that movie changed dramatically from the
script.
I
mean, it did, because the original cut of that movie was almost 4 hours. Huh. And there were just a lot of scenes, and the biggest difference was that I think the script, which was a really good script, but it was more of an ensemble piece. Mm-hmm. Oh. But really, the focus was like the main character, the Jeremy Renner character. Mm-hmm. And so my wife, Chris, who was also my co-editor, like we quickly realized that like the focus should be Jeremy Renner. So it was like a matter of like focusing it. And making mostly about that guy and the two other characters who were great, but they were really the supporting.
So it could have been the Thin Red Line, but you made it.
It could have been. Yeah, it could have been, but it shouldn't have been.
Right, of course.
It was a thriller. I mean, ultimately, we viewed the movie as like a Hitchcock thriller about a guy who was like disarming bombs. And
how did you guys get that gig? Because that was obviously someone you hadn't worked with before, and was Catherine Bigelow aware?
Yeah, it was weird because I just finished. I just finished Spidey 2 and then Drag Me to Hell, and I was just like exhausted, and I started it was before Drag Me to Hell and after Spidey 3. Mm-hmm. So I just finished Spidey 3, and I was on that movie for like 2 years. It was miserable.
Wow, 2 years on the movie.
And I just wanted to, like, at that point I had to get like I had to finish Gone with the Pope. That was like a priority. Yeah. I had to get I Drink Your Blood Out and all these other pieces. Yeah. And all these other movies. So there was like so much pressure because when I get in a movie, I can't work on all this other stuff. It's like, and these movies require so much energy. So I really wanted to like finish Gone with the Pope and do some of this other stuff. And like right after I finished it, I got a call from Catherine. Huh. And a friend of mine, this guy named Paul Otteson, who has done like the sound restoration on a lot of these movies, but has ended up becoming like this like really top sound designer. We worked together on the Spider-Man movies. He's like an Academy Award winning guy now. Anyway, he had gotten hired onto Hurt Locker and recommended me to Catherine as the editor because we had just finished Spidey 3. So she called me and called me from like Kuwait or Jordan or wherever they were, and I turned it down. I said, look, I Near Dark was my favorite movie of 1987. Awesome, and I love that movie, and I would be thrilled to work with you, but I would love the idea of going to Jordan to work on a movie, but I just finished this like 2-year run, and I have a distribution company, and I need to go see my family and all this stuff. I really can't do it. And she said, oh, well, I understand. Okay. And then like two weeks later, I got another call. Huh. Hi, Bob. This is Catherine Bigelow. I'm calling from like a Starbucks at a military base in Kuwait. Wow. And she said, I would really love for you to do the movie. And I don't even know if she like had seen the other movies I'd done, but I think my friend Paul was really talking me up, and I think maybe
she had seen Gone with the Pope. I'm
sure she had.
Yeah, Quentin didn't see it, but she did. But
did she say, Bob, you're either in
or you're out?
But I can't, so I turned it down again, and then like 2 days later, she called again. She goes, I could tell you like you're interested in the project, and I would really love for you to do it. I think it's a really special project. What would it take for you to do it? Maybe we can start somebody else, like an assistant or somebody, while we're here shooting, and we're going to be shooting we're going to start shooting in a couple of weeks, and we're going to be shooting for 3 months, and maybe we can start somebody else. And then when we get back in September, you can come on the movie. And I said, well, let me see if I can make that work. So in the meantime, I talked to my wife, Chris, who's an editor. And prior to that, she was going, because this was near the border of Iraq during the surge. So things were really hot over there at the time. And she was saying, it would be cool to work on that movie, Bob, but there's no way I'm going to let you go over to Jordan during the Iraq war to work on a movie. There's absolutely no way. So I got this third call from Catherine, really wanted to figure out a way to make it work. So I got off the phone and I said, I was talking over with my wife. I said, well, maybe if you went over and started editing the movie. And she goes, yeah, I would be interested in doing that. It's as a blonde,
that's how you do it,
fair skin, like a target essentially in the Middle East.
That's funny.
So we hatched up the scheme that she would start the movie, work on it while they were shooting, cutting the dailies, getting stuff, feedback to the set, we need this or that. And it's so important to have somebody there cutting when you're shooting, because especially when you're in a rush, and because there's no coming back to Jordan, but if you're missing something, right?
Yeah.
So she flew over there and started the movie. And then there was so much footage. I mean, even she got there, they were a weekend of shooting, and there was already this desk with a giant mountain of film stacked up on it, because they were shooting 16 millimeter, 4 cameras all running simultaneously, all shooting fake documentary style, just until the roll ran out. So every roll was a single take, no slates, a lot of stuff they just didn't slate, and it was this cinema verite way of making a film.
Right.
And
like a real war photographer would shoot.
Yeah, which was kind of a cool way to do it. But it, from an organizational point of view, it made it really hard, because it's if you were looking for a close-up, you would literally have to scan through 2 hours of footage to find a close-up.
Yeah. Wow.
Because there were no conventional setups. So Chris was over there, and she was cutting the movie, and it was 150 degrees, and it was miserable, and but it was cool. It was cool being over there, and she went to Egypt to see the pyramids one weekend and all this cool stuff. Wadi Rum, where they shot Lawrence of Arabia, and anyway, I ended up going out there and visiting for a week, and kind of bossing everybody around, and the big shot, and getting to see Jordan and go to Petra and stuff like that, but without actually having to but still being able to come back and work on my stuff. But in the meantime, she was sending me dailies from the movie, and I was getting all these piles of DVDs of all the dailies, and I just thought the stuff was terrible. And I was trying to figure out a way to not do the movie. The whole time she was there, it was I got to figure out a way. I know Catherine is expecting me to do this, but maybe you could just stay on and take it over. It's I just think this is this isn't
going to go anywhere.
Apparently, everybody on the crew just thought it was going to be horrible too.
I actually heard that from one of the producers, Chartier, Nicholas Chartier.
Yeah, Nicholas. Yeah,
that was my first gig here, was script reading there when I got to LA just after he'd won the Oscar, and I had heard it was the kind of thing where she would just take the cameraman and go off and make a film, and the rest of the crew didn't really always know what she was doing.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of communication, and the conditions were tough.
Yeah.
But in her defense, she came back and she had the whole movie. Everything was in there. It took a huge amount of effort to find it, and it was cutting a documentary in that way, I guess. But so Chris ended up getting back in September, and I kind of grudgingly came on and started putting stuff together. And really, I'd seen a couple of things Chris had cut, and I went, yeah, this is good. Yeah, this is going to be all right. Jeremy's great. He seemed almost like a kind of a young Steve McQueen or something.
Mm-hmm.
Had a really cool energy to him. I was only familiar with him from the Jeffrey Dahmer movie prior to that, of course,
really
which I thought was great.
Yeah, he's actually good in that. Yeah.
And one more reason that made me want to do Hurt Locker, but yeah, we started putting it together, and it just it was a lot of work, but once you got the scenes together, pretty much most of the scenes in the movie were our first cut.
Yeah. Because
there wasn't really a long schedule, so it was really just getting in, concentrating. Chris was working in one room. We were over at this place, Christie's in Burbank, and Catherine would come in, and we were just really work around the clock, just trying to get the scenes together, and it worked well. Chris would cut something, and I would get it, and I would fix it up a little bit, and because we're married, we could yell at each other, and nobody would There was no hard feelings or whatever. And
does it feel subversive, like when you're accepting an Oscar, but also knowing you're the guy who brings like Cannibal Holocaust to America?
yeah,
To me, that's wild. Like I can't think of anything
Yes.
crazier than the idea that you're these two poles that are like one's in denial of the other.
well, that's why I made a point of like pointing out like Roger Corman, who was in the audience.
Right.
And
Was that when he got his lifetime?
that's when he got his Lifetime Achievement
which is
Award,
great,
which was cool. And then afterwards, they had this thing. They have like a thank you cam because they didn't want people to like go through like a laundry list of thank you. So they said, well, look, we're going to have a thank you cam where you can thank as many people as you want once you get your award. So bring your list, and then we'll post it on the internet so all your like friends and family could see it. So I had this like long list of like everybody from like Russ Meyer to Herschel Gordon Lewis to Lucio Fulci to Rudy Ray Moore to Duke Mitchell.
Dolomite? You think Dolomite?
Absolutely. Dolomite really gets thanks on.
Lewis has never been mentioned on the Oscars.
If you go to our
before.
credit pages, Rudy Ray Moore gets a special thing that every one of our discs dating back to like Cannibal
Is Dolomite
Holocaust.
on Blu-ray anywhere?
Yeah, Xenon put it out. And they're not great, but I always want to put.
Dolomite's amazing.
I love Rudy, and I was like obsessed with Rudy for so many years, and have all of his records. And,
Him and Duke together in a movie would have been like mad.
well, I always thought of like Rudy Ray Moore as like the Italian Duke Mitchell.
Oh yeah. That
Right? I mean, Duke Mitchell is like the Italian Rudy Ray Moore.
yeah.
Because Rudy was all about like
personality.
working in the nightclubs, and Rudy like starred in them, did the music,
and he did the poetry,
did everything.
He
Yeah, so it's like. Yeah, so to me they're very like similar,
So like, I mean, before we end, I definitely want to bring it back to the Blu-rays that are coming out and the disc and the work that you're doing on the Beyond. We are looking at a copy of the Beyond, which is coming out in the next 2 months, right?
It's coming out March 24th. It was supposed to come out originally in December. Then it was supposed to come out in February. And then it was supposed to come out.
I think you had the same day as Don't Look Now, and I was like, that can't exist. These two films coming out.
It's like it would.
And the same day as Gone with the Pope.
Yeah,
because that was scheduled and that will come out. But we had this problem with getting these stupid cases that we use. And I didn't want to compromise. It's like I never want to.
And did you have to do much work on the remastering?
Yeah, we did a lot of work on the ton of work on the remastering. We did there's like 1 million new interviews and features.
Oh, cool.
So
there's So
I know it's totally packed. It's not just all like the old
and
stuff.
the soundtrack's in there too.
And this is great. The original soundtrack, which sounds so incredible because I had them go back to the original master tapes.
Right.
So they were all transferred in 24-bit 96K, and it just like sounds phenomenal. I mean, it's just jaw dropping how great this sounds. And we also did it for Cannibal Holocaust and Big Gun Down, and we're doing it again for Cannibal Ferox with the soundtrack.
I still haven't seen Corruption. That was another one of your releases last year.
Corruption is great.
I haven't seen it yet. I got to see it.
Corruption is great. It's one of those movies I saw on late night TV as a kid.
Peter Cushing.
It was always like super disturbing. Like,
it's very disturbing.
there's like a head in the freezer that I always remembered, and it's like really violent. It's like one of the first slasher movies in a weird way.
But it's Peter Cushing, so you kind of
it's like so brutal.
Expect it to be different.
Yeah, brutal, and like the killing scenes are like really just like shot with distorted fisheye lenses, and anyway, it was one of these movies that like Columbia had and never really put out on video. It never came out on VHS, and so because I'd worked over at Sony, which is like owns Columbia Studios, I always said, man, you've got these great movies like Corruption, like The Big Gun Down that have never come out ever, not even on VHS. So at one point I got an opportunity. I just said, I'm going to try to get some of their movies. So I went and they were crazy enough to give a company called Grindhouse Releasing. Yeah. I can understand Corruption and maybe Big Gun Down, but The Swimmer,
yeah.
It's like they said, well, you could why don't you pick out 3 movies? So I like looked through and I said I would really love to get Corruption, Big Gun Down, and how about The Swimmer? Because I knew there was out of like there was like a really crummy DVD with a really bad transfer.
I can take credit for another thing. I take credit for God Told Me To going to Blu-ray because I convinced Lustig to do it.
Lustig on the show.
But number 2, I'll take credit for convincing Stuart Gordon after he was on our show to do your liner notes.
Which is great.
That happened here.
Yeah, because I wanted Stuart to do it. I heard he was a fan of the movie, and I couldn't get through. And then you hooked me up.
And I had my Australian poster I gave you for the thing because I that's like still top 10 all time.
It's such a great movie, The Swimmer, and it was one of those movies that I saw on Laserdisc years ago and never forgot. And it seems like a weird choice for Grindhouse Releasing, but
you just won an award a couple of days ago.
Yeah,
and it's funny because like. The horror fans are like so conflicted by that movie. It's like I keep getting emails from people going like these guys who are like the black shirt Fangoria crowd. No offense, but I mean
it's all good. We know who we are.
But they're so in a weird way. The horror fans are like it's kind of the most conservative group
about what they watch.
Because they'll only watch a certain thing. They wear the uniform, as my wife calls it. It's like. Why don't we keep saying like the guys who make the T-shirts, like Sean Smith? Well, why don't you make an orange T-shirt or green or something? It's like no, everybody just wants the black T-shirts.
Sean Lewis.
Yeah.
Ron Con guy.
So
I'd wear a
so many people like. Just because they were fans of Grindhouse bought the swimmer, and then I get these emails going, I just saw that thing, and I saw this guy Burt Lancaster on the cover in a bathing suit, and I just like never wanted to watch it. Yeah. But then it's like then I watched the movie, and I just like started watching it, and I just thought it was great.
Yeah,
and I just love that movie. And,
really hypnotic.
Yeah, and the horror fans have like, and which is what's cool to be able to introduce. I mean, it's like kind of a no-brainer to introduce people to like Cannibal Holocaust at this point. It's like. Or The Beyond or another, like so many people have seen so much stuff, but to be able to turn on people to like something like The Swimmer,
which is also a director who might be one of the most misunderstood. I think he's got like 5 or 6 great films.
Frank Perry
is a knockout of a movie, and no one's seen these movies,
which is great. Diary of a Mad Housewife is incredible.
Exactly.
Yeah, Played as a Laze is great.
Richard Benjamin is my wife's cousin is married to his son, who looks just like him. So when I see them, first thing I start talking about is Diary of a Mad Housewife. I'm like, that's the greatest performance ever. He goes, oh, Frank Perry is very difficult to work with.
Yeah,
he didn't have a very good time on it. I'm like, but I loved it. He's like, okay.
Yeah, when we got our award for The Swimmer, Bruce Davison was in the audience. He played Willard, and he didn't realize, but there was a little clip of him like talking when they did the interview for Short Eyes. I would say Scorpion or Code Red put it out, and they had
prison movie.
Yeah, he plays a child molester. It's a really cool 70s movie with a
Quentin played it on
Curtis Mayfield score, which is great, and it's a really cool movie.
Okay.
And anyway, Bruce Davison stars in it, and but he had also done a movie with Frank Perry. He was in last summer, and had worked with Burt Lancaster as a co-star of Uzala's Raid, and so. It was cool because he was in the audience when we got the award, and I go, "Yeah, Bruce Davison, you probably don't even know you're on this disc." And so we were talking afterwards, cool. And then he was like telling me all these Frank Perry stories.
Maybe you need a side company of Grindhouse, like a non-horror one, so you don't confuse the horror fans.
I love that's the fun part. That's the fun part. I love confusing people. It's sort of like American Hippie in Israel. It's such a weird offbeat movie.
That's a wacky film.
Or the Duke Mitchell movies. I mean, they really, I mean, they're exploitation, but it's like they're also. I mean, Grindhouse, I think is like like everybody like. It's like it become a genre. I mean, for us, it was like always a place. And they were always called exploitation movies. I don't think they were actually really ever referred to as Grindhouse movies. Nobody really called them that. It was like they played either in the Grindhouses or the drive-ins. It's like, but it's been like become this like kind of like lame genre name now, which is.
Are there titles you're still chasing that you've never been able to get because of rights, or that you just keep pursuing?
Yeah, like what's your dream title?
I don't know. I'm just at this point. I'm just trying to finish everything up and get it out, and it's kind of
you got Scum of the Earth.
Because I thought I read Pieces. You're doing a Blu-ray that
we're doing all of our old movies. We're doing Blu-rays. Can the Brain Pieces, Cannibal Ferox, which is going to be incredible.
I Drink Your Blood.
Scum of the Earth.
I Drink Your Blood.
Nice.
Scum of the Earth, a.k.a. Poor White Trash Part 2, directed by S.F. Brown.
Which I have a clamshell of.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I have like one of the original VHS.
Yeah,
and I have Poor White Trash 1 as well in clamshell.
So after that, once you're caught up, do you think you'll be saying you keep
get out? Yeah, I want to get out.
You're done? You're out of the way?
Well, it's such a distraction. I mean, there's so much, like, it's so labor intensive just to do the stuff to the level that I want to do it at.
And you had a partner. You're working with Sage.
So it's definitely a little bit of a different dynamic without Sage. It's kind of
passion,
a sad thing. Right? Yeah, Sage was great. And
for people who don't, we talked about Vic a lot on the show, but it's like one of our favorite short form.
Vic is so incredible.
It's amazing.
It's so.
You edited that?
Well, John Gallagher started it, and then at a certain point, I came on and like
he fell asleep.
No, John's great, but I just it just needed to get done. And Sage and John would have like, as it was, it took like 5 or 6 years. They would. John would still probably be working on it. Would have never. I mean, I shouldn't say that, but
Now, John's been on, and he's a good human.
No, John is great, and at a certain point, they just wasn't getting work done, and I just finished like I think it had finished between I think Spidey 1 and Spidey 2. I like did part of it, and then between Spidey 2 and Spidey 3, like we finished it and mixed it, got it done, and it's such a great movie.
Yeah,
and I was glad that I could just like help out in some way to help him get it done.
Well, you need to believe us when we talk about how cool Gone with the Pope is. But start with Massacre Mafia style.
Yeah.
If you're going to watch them, I watch them in order. I think Massacre Mafia
that's the way I saw them.
has the best opening, in my opinion.
And is this out now?
Yeah,
Massacre Mafia style?
I have. It was delayed because of those stupid cases, but it comes out March 10th is the street date.
March 10th.
So
And
it's
then-
being manufactured and shipped even as we speak.
And then Pope is when?
March 24th.
Okay, so
Excellent.
you got a
Really
lot
back to
happening
back.
in March then. All the films.
Yeah, they're all turning. And then
beyond.
Cannibal Ferox, I think, will be out April 14th.
Is there going to be a soundtrack with Cannibal
First
Ferox?
one's
Because
there.
that's quite possibly my favorite soundtrack ever.
And the soundtrack, we finally found the original master tapes, which had never been found before.
Ooh.
And it sounds so incredible. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Not because I have
That's so cool.
the what company was it? Wax Records,
No, One Way Static. I
yeah,
think,
One Way
put it
Static.
out.
One of them put them out on
On
record,
vinyl.
so
Yeah.
I have the vinyl. But I'm like, well, this does me no good when I like go to my office or in
Yeah.
my car. So
No,
I love that soundtrack.
And when you hear it from the actual original source tapes, which for years I claimed were lost, and I just was persistent, said keep searching. They finally found them, and
You need this hobby. You can't leave this hobby.
No way.
This hobby needs you.
this hobby is
That's one of the weirdest things. If you watch Cannibal Holocaust and Cannibal Ferox back to back, which is just like a clusterfuck of a night to begin
Yeah.
with on your brain, but they're stylistically very similar movies, but the soundtracks makes them completely different views because of it, because the soundtracks are so completely like different.
well, yeah, you could tell it was like Cannibal Ferox. I think it's got that kind of cheesy opening. Theme, but it's really not the theme because they were just really trying to set the feeling of New York City.
Yeah.
Like the hustle and bustle, kind of disco-y feeling. And
I love that music.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
it's a lot more like it's a lot more pragmatic. It's just like trying to set the tone of the city. And then when they get to the jungle, it switches to this like really oppressive kind of horror sounding music with like mellotron and like low tones and everything else. So
Whereas Holocaust does the opposite, right? It plays this like airy,
Yeah,
it's like
beautiful,
sweet strings
sweet music.
the
yeah,
entire time.
It's a different approach, but
Yeah.
I think it's just the difference between Lenzi and Deodato. I think Lenzi is like more based in like kind of like these kind of police movies and these kind of action movies, these incredible like crime movies and thrillers and things that he did. Whereas Deodato's background was more like in neorealism or something.
Right.
And
That's why it has the docu.
like the Mondo movies were more of his inspiration or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
So it's and I love both of the movies. Cannibal Ferox gets a bad rap, but I mean, I think when people see the new release, just like even compositionally, it's going to look better just because you'll see. I think Lenzi's setups are like really nice, and that I mean, they're really efficient. The moves that he does and everything else. I mean, obviously he had a low budget, but he really made it work. And Giovanni Lobato Radice is incredible in that movie, and it really goes over the top with the violence and the gore. I mean,
I always
to-
like Ferox better.
yeah, and a lot of, my wife does too, and it's like she thinks of it as like almost like a western or like more. It's more entertaining. It's more like a conventional
agree
story
with that.
with a
It's
strong
much more entertainment.
protagonist. It's like a protagonist and antagonist relationship between like John Morgan, who's this like psychopath, and these like kids who are trying to survive.
And if you are to cut out the animal violence, I find Ferox to be much more disturbing as well. Like I think that the gore and the violence is pushed a little bit further in that one.
It is. It really is. And, it's like we're not going to do the like animal cruelty free version of Ferox because unlike Deodato, his animal scenes were pretty modular. They could be lifted up, but Lenzi's scenes are like more integrated into the movie in a weird way.
Huh.
Yeah.
And so Poltergeist is coming out when? Do you know?
In July.
Okay. So that is
In 3D.
What?
Yeah, which I know
I didn't
people,
know
It's
this
so
part.
kick-ass. Oh my
people
God.
don't think that's great, but I mean,
Are
you kidding?
I want to see a horror
love
film in 3D.
But you know what? To do a ghost movie in 3D?
Yeah.
Like even before they started making Poltergeist, Sam was talking about it. I go, yeah, you guys should really do it in 3D because to do a ghost movie in 3D would be the coolest thing.
We should try to get the director on.
So
Yeah.
Gil's background with Monster House was in 3D.
Yeah, right.
Which was awesome in
Yeah,
3D.
yeah.
I'm such like a 3D.
So
whore. I hate to say
he's
it.
so into 3D and I'm so into 3D. So it's like we go in and like we're really trying to push the 3D.
I would have been fine if the new Evil Dead had been in 3D.
I would too.
I'm
I
pretty
love
okay
that.
with that too.
Yeah,
I
it's
know
the
that
kind of film. It's
lot of-
films,
a lot of horror fans just really poo-poo it and say,
Not that guy.
it's not.
No,
No,
I have
I'm
3D TV at home.
But
But there's a lot of lame 3D and a lot of pedestrian 3D. But like when it's coming at you and it's great, like Andy Wall's Frankenstein or Creature from the Black Lagoon
Yeah,
or
the wacky
one.
Coming at You or like any of those movies, House of Wax.
Oh, House of Wax. Yeah,
I wrote in an article
great.
a couple of weeks ago, I could watch somebody flip pancakes in 3D
Yeah.
and I would be mesmerized for hours.
Again,
by it.
it's
amazing.
As a kid growing up in Michigan, I was obsessed with wanting to see 3D movies, and I would actually drive from my small town down to Detroit whenever they played a 3D movie. It was like a 100-mile drive to see like Mad Magician or whatever was playing there.
Wow.
So
that made me way more excited about Poltergeist. I did not know that. So already, even if it's a straight remake, at least there's something different.
Yeah, no, and like I said, he's really pushing the 3D too. So we're trying to do like really cool 3D stuff.
Excellent.
Well, don't forget this Friday when you're listening to this show
tonight.
If you're in LA, if you're so lucky,
join us for Beyond
on 35. We will be there. Come look for us because I've told Rob this a lot because we did our top 10 list of all time last year. Remember we did, and Beyond was my number like 7 of all time, but I'd never seen it on a big screen, and so for me this is like super exciting. And I didn't want to watch it again until I could.
So when I was a kid, I mean, I've been watching The Beyond for a very long time, but when I was a kid, there's this red-haired girl in the movie.
Oh yeah.
My neighbor, the neighbor boy who I used to watch horror films with, used to tell me I look like her, and he used to be like, "You're like that annoying red-haired girl in The Beyond," and then she ends up getting like acid poured on her face in the movie or something.
She Elric's ready.
You totally look like her.
That's it. I am her.
But I mean, just if you get a chance, I mean, we're not going to get many more chances to see these movies on film, because so many theaters are phasing it out, and to see The Beyond on film in 35, and to see the cinematography of Sergio Salvati.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the thing for me when we first went to Rome. Just like having seen these movies like really crummy dubbed down VHS copies, and then the first time we saw The Beyond, we saw like a test print of Reel 2, and it was just so beautiful. I mean, the colors and the composition, Fulci's camera work and Salvati's lighting. I mean, it just like
takes you somewhere too. It takes you somewhere you're not.
I mean, it's just like incredible.
That final set where they're walking into a paint.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the movie a million times. I still get chills.
Yeah,
when
that's my favorite ending. I wanted a sequel that opened right there, and like what would happen now? I want to see that.
And David Warbeck, we met him, and he actually had a sequel written called Beyond the Beyond that started.
Holy shit, that's the greatest title ever.
I'm starting a band.
Beyond the Beyond.
Beyond the Beyond.
Beyond the Beyond.
And
wow, hashtag Beyond the Beyond.
We were in London. We went and met with him. He was living in this castle, this like Baroque castle, and it came out like in a robe, like this.
I love this guy already.
Yeah, and it spent like 40 minutes telling us like the whole story of Beyond the Beyond.
You couldn't get the script to see it?
I wish, because shortly thereafter, he was like really sick at the time, and then shortly thereafter he passed away. I mean, when we recorded our commentary track, he actually came out of the hospital for like a couple hours to record it with Catriona. And you wouldn't know listening to the track, but I mean, he was literally on his deathbed.
Wow.
And like 2 weeks later, he had passed away.
Wow.
So,
oh my gosh.
I mean, but the guy was so incredible. I mean,
would it exist anywhere?
This is our summer pilgrimage, guys.
I don't know.
We're going to
I don't know if
find
he ever,
the script.
Can we make it? This is like our Richard Stanley documentary. It's just Beyond the Beyond.
Finding Beyond the Beyond.
Is
it was like it's this incredible story. It was so surreal being in this castle, like place, like listening to him tell us the story. It was like raining outside because it was like London, and it was like this weird like Baroque castle, and he's sitting there in this like red silk robe, and we're having tea. One is bringing us like traditional tea and the whole thing.
I'm picturing like every Poe Corman set ever.
Yeah.
When you say Baroque Castle, I'm immediately like, oh, Vincent Price was there.
Yeah, it was like totally like that.
So was the idea that the film would have started right there?
Started right there.
And you're in the Beyond?
Started right there.
Oh, hell yes, guys.
I guess Insidious has kind of gone there now with the Further, which is definitely a take.
Yeah, but it's not Beyond the
Further
Beyond.
doesn't have dead bodies, and they're not blind.
I always love when our best story of the whole night comes at the very end of a 2.5-hour episode. It's like, you better listen to the whole show, because get ready for Beyond the Beyond.
Stick around till the end, because we're going to throw Beyond the Beyond at him.
Wow.
Yeah.
But then the one other movie that I would be willing to extend Grindhouse Releasing would be Day the Clown Cried.
Oh, well, yeah.
Jerry Lewis's movie. And I've been trying to contact him.
Is it a finished movie, or is it?
I don't think it was ever finished, but I think it could be finished. I think at this point, like I think I'm the only guy to do it.
What happened? He showed it. Was it because he showed some of it?
I think what happened was because if you read his books and everything, his autobiography and everything, he's always talking about it favorably, and he's always saying this is a movie that needs to be seen and will one day be finished. And he was in a bunch of lawsuits at the time, which was 40 years ago, and I'm sure they've all like fallen by the wayside. The writer apparently the person who had written the screenplay or hated it, and he wasn't getting along with the country of Sweden that where he was making it, and all this stuff. But
it's set in a concentration camp, and Jerry Lee Lewis is
well, that too. But actually,
he directed this,
the script is weird, of course. But there's actually a version of the script that there are two versions of the script floating around. There's a version that a lot of people have read, and then there's a second version where he has rewritten a lot of the stuff. And he actually like made it a lot better. When he was on his way over to Sweden to shoot the movie, he like did a lot of rewrites on the script, and a lot of the things that were like super lame and like not really landing were actually became good.
Oh, interesting.
So I really think that the movie could be great.
Do you have any ins through having worked with so many people?
I was trying it, and I really thought getting the Academy Award would give me a chance, and it actually did get me far enough where he actually did call my lawyer, because I was like saying, hey, you know, I've been bothering you, but I just won the Academy Award, and so I think I'm valid, and I can bring all these like Academy Award winning sound people or whatever. And I know have so many connections, and then he called my lawyer out of the blue, my friend George Bronstein, who like works with me on all this stuff, and actually like just said, you know, I respect Bob, and I admire his work and everything, but there's no way I would ever finish this movie.
Wow,
interesting.
But I really think it has a lot of potential, and
you know, sometimes you just have to keep bothering someone. You know,
I think so too. And I don't want to give up, because I really think that there's
there's a lot of people who are. I mean, that is like one of the holy grails, like that and Magnificent Amber. Things. I mean,
but I really think that, and I really think it could be, and I think what happened was, Harry Shearer, he confided in Harry Shearer and said, I'll let you see the movie. And then Harry Shearer just like wrote this like axe piece. I mean, he just wrote this piece like really tearing the movie apart. And it's become that famous piece that like people like, I think it was called like, you know, Bozo the Clown in Auschwitz or something. Whatever it was, but it was like, it just made the movie seem like the most horrible thing. It was
so maybe
like,
that's what he's
it was funny,
about.
you know, Harry Shearer is a funny writer and everything, but it was like really, he just butchered.
So maybe he doesn't want to.
And I think it just like, and I think now it's become such a joke, especially with the internet for so many years, that it just like it's become soured in his mind.
That's interesting.
Which is sad. And I really just keep saying, I really think that this movie, if it was finished properly, could be great.
I think if we can find Beyond the Beyond, you can finish that movie. You can finish The Day the Clown Cried. That's our agreement.
We'll get them both.
Well, thanks for transcending not knowing what the podcast would be. This is basically radio.
It is. It's like a talk show.
It is, and
you're gonna have to come back
it's like on a computer, right?
Because I have been dying to do an exploitation episode for 2 years.
Oh, really?
You and us stick together.
We can get
because my PhD is focused in exploitation, so I want to get like super geeky, like Northville Cemetery Massacre style.
Which was made in Michigan, by the way.
See, and this is why you have to come back on, so I can like do my exploitation geek out, because these guys don't do it.
Bill Lustig and Bob coming in together.
Okay, with me, because this is how I came tonight. I came with a list of my favorite exploitation films from 1940 on.
Oh, and what are some of them?
Okay, here, I'll pass you the list.
We'll do that off camera.
A lot of biker films,
I love my biker films.
Take us out with
Girl
the
Boss
music.
Gorilla.
Nunsploitation.
I actually have a book out on Nunsploitation.
And Herschel and Lewis, who I love.
I have a book, and we will continue this later.
Hillbilly movies, I love them.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Grindhouse Releasing theme song.
And if you can see
No one
these
under
movies in
18
theaters,
admitted.
go to a theater.
On the big screen. Support the big screen
first.
experience.
Thanks, Bob, for coming. This has been
for having
fun.